Kindly let's be seated. We are starting off. The Pastoralists Leadership Summit 2024, Unlocking Policy and Financial Bottlenecks to Maximize Pastoralism Potential in Kenya. We will start off with our national anthem, followed by the East Africa Community Anthem. Kindly, let's be upstanding for our national anthem.
Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Thank you. Be seated. I would then next request the representative from SUPKEM for a word of prayer. You're welcome.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. اللهم اجعل اجتماعنا هذا اجتماع خير وبركة، اللهم وفقنا لما فيه الخير والصلاح في الدارين آمين يا رب العالمين. بارك الله.
Thank you very much for the prayers. I will ask our communication colleagues to play for us a short video that will present an introductory part of this day. Kindly, you can proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and esteemed delegates, welcome to the 4th Pastoralist Leadership Summit 2024, right here in the heart of Wajir County. Today, we come together to celebrate the strength, resilience, and contributions of pastoralist communities, the backbone of Kenya's arid and semi-arid regions. This summit serves as a vital platform to address critical issues, share innovative ideas, and unlock the immense potential of pastoralism for sustainable development. We are honored to host leaders, policymakers, partners, and stakeholders committed to tackling policy and financial bottlenecks and advancing the pastoralist agenda. Let us unite, collaborate, and chart a path toward a brighter and more inclusive future for pastoralism in Kenya and beyond. Once again, welcome to the 4th Pastoralist Leadership Summit 2024.
Thank you very much. Indeed, welcome to the Pastoralist Leadership Summit 2024. It's a pleasure to be here, all of us, this morning. Just turn to your friend and tell them that you look good and we have to be active today. Yes, tell them that you are interacting with a pastoralist. You must be a happy person this morning. Yes, thank you very much. Now, allow me, with your permission, to welcome Honorable FCPA Ahmed Abdullahi, the Governor of Wajir. His Excellency, please. You'll have the opportunity to provide a welcoming remarks this morning, and also provide an opportunity to one or two speakers who were not able to speak yesterday. It is my hope and the hope of everybody that we can maximize on the time today. So today I will be a very strict moderator. So I'm just giving that as a caution, so that when you come and I tell you kindly stop, you will be able to support me and support everyone so that we can maximize the opportunity. Bwana Governor, over to you, sir. Okay.
Bismillah. Hamjambo. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Mulipata mahali ya kulala? Mulala vizuri? Very good. May I take this opportunity to welcome you back for the main deliberations today. Last night we ran out of time. There is I think three people that were to make remarks, but in the interest of time, we had promised them that we will give them an opportunity today. And as they say, promises made, promises kept. So I want to invite the representative of the country director of UNICEF to come and speak to us. James, please.
Good morning. It's a real privilege to be speaking to you on behalf of UNICEF today. I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Governor of Wajir, His Excellency Ahmed Abdullahi, as the host and chair of the Council of Governors. Excellencies, all governors here present, honourable senators present, honourable members of parliament, honourable members of county assemblies present, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's evident that the pastoral communities contribute a huge amount to the life, economy and prosperity of Kenya. The pastoral population is estimated around a fifth of the national population, but 75% of the landmass. According to a 2019 study on the value of pastoralism, the sector has an economic worth of over $1.1 billion US, with livestock accounting for 92% of that, and 80% of all livestock of the country comes from the ASAL regions. The unique identity of pastoralist community life enriches the culture of Kenya. And the last decade has seen critical milestones and achievements in support of pastoralism. The Community Land Act of 2016, the establishment of key institutions such as the NDMA, which has helped save lives and build resilience, and of course the National Council for Nomadic Education, NACONEC, has been a key instrument to support education for pastoralist children. And yet significant challenges remain, and I presume this is why we're here. So even in the last decade, climate disasters, floods, droughts have intensified in frequency and severity. In 2023, it's estimated that 2.6 million livestock were lost. In the rains earlier this year, there was devastation and destruction of businesses, livestock, crops, but also health facilities, schools, and water sources. Children in this region face many deprivations, just a few. In Kenya, 2.5 million children are out of school. 1.5 million of these come from the ASAL region. Of all the severely underweight children in the country, more than 60% come from the ASAL counties. Child diets in Kenya remain suboptimal. 60% of infants under 6 months are exclusively breastfed. 60% of children under 2 live in food poverty, but rates are as high as 90% in some counties, in Samburu and Turkana, for instance. In the area of water and sanitation, most ASAL counties fall well below the national average for access to water and sanitation, but well above the national average for open defecation. And finally, violence against children is a key issue and in some parts increasing. Birth registration lags behind national levels, and female genital cutting is high, up to 90% in some counties. So what is UNICEF and what is the UN doing? The UN plan, the Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, focuses on the ASAL counties, and UNICEF operates within that. UNICEF invests about $30 million a year in the ASAL counties, most of it going to nutrition, health, and water. A large focus of our work is on disaster risk management and supporting the counties with bills and policies that enable budgetary allocation and capacity for emergency response. To address the burden of malnutrition, UNICEF and partners have supported the Ministry of Health to treat over half of all severely acute malnourished children in the country this year. UNICEF continues to support counties in strengthening the health system, reversing poor indicators at county level, enhancing access to quality health services. And one area that I'm particularly proud to represent is innovation in the water sector. Deep borehole drilling has the potential to bring about transformative change and long-lasting change for communities in need of sustainable water access. And finally, in the area of protection, UNICEF has been working to address the high prevalence of female genital cutting and to support the rollout of the National Positive Parenting Program to ensure that children have a loving and safe environment. In education, nearly 250,000 children have been brought back to school with UNICEF support, and UNICEF has supported the Nomadic Education Policy and Alternative Program guideline and framework for integration of Duksi and Madrasa schools into the formal system. So, to conclude, this summit represents a key opportunity to unlock and expand the potential of pastoralists in Kenya. What are some key areas to focus on? Kenya is rich in statistics, but specific data on pastoralist populations must be strengthened for evidence-based decision-making. To address key climate challenges, it's critical to cushion pastoralists against the risks of drought and contribute to resilience building. Through integrating disaster risk reduction, risk-informed programming, setting aside contingency funding and supplies, and building community resilience for disasters and emergency. UNICEF would support targeted investments for pastoralist communities, including percentages in county budgets for social services and allocation of an emergency budget for preparedness. And finally, yesterday we drove from the airport into town. We passed the Amud Primary School. You probably have seen it. There's a quotation on the wall, or a slogan. It says, "Education is the great equalizer of the time." I think it's quite an inspiring thought. And so the call from the UN side is to prioritize the re-enrollment, retention, and early childhood development for children, to strengthen partnerships, to bring more children back to school, to ensure that they stay, and to invest in quality programs to improve learning outcomes. Finally, UNICEF is honored to be part of the summit. Thank you for this opportunity. We hope this can be a significant catalyst for change, and we commit to join hands with the government and with partners to envision a future where pastoralists thrive and their children have access to every service they need to flourish and to fulfill their rights and ultimately their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. May I now ask the representative of the Aga Khan University, it was Professor Abu Bakr, please come and address us.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a bit surprised I didn't realize I would speak this morning. So on behalf of Aga Khan University, we are honored to partner with the Pastoralist Leadership Summit to be here. Our key focus is around giving children a good start. Just like UNICEF, I know there are very many, priorities in this area. But if we really want to transform this society, we need to invest in human capital. You know, like if we are going to get good educational outcomes, if we are going to get productive workforce, and really get a change in our communities, we need to be able to ensure children have an early start, a good quality early childhood, but also good quality ECD work. So Aga Khan University and the Aga Khan Development Network as a whole, our interest in this area in how best can we invest in the early years so that we improve educational outcomes, we improve health outcomes, and ensure a productive workforce in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Now, before we get into the first plenary session, I want to call upon the Senator of this county, Honorable Abbas Sheikh, to also greet us and formally welcome all of you. Senator, please.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Governor of Wajir, who is the chair also for the Council of Governors, Excellencies, governors from various pastoral areas. I can see advisors here, like Dr. D. Welcome. PSs, Member of Parliament. When I say Member of Parliament, I know some of you think that's only the National Assembly. It includes also the senators. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, I think I missed last night opening of this important function. But however, I want to thank the Governor for giving me this opportunity. And I want to take this moment to welcome you all to Wajir. Wajir is actually a very old town. It is now 112 years old since it started. It's a county of oasis. You see, we don't have permanent roads, waters. There's no river here, but by the blessing of the God, we are surviving on shallow wells and boreholes, the underground water. Therefore, it's actually unique by itself, by nature of its climatic change, position. A lack of, rivers. But of course, we're still producing food, at least something that we can be able not to sustain us, but something to at least take care of our immediate needs. And I therefore want to tell Dr. D and his team that I know all along from since independence, the planners actually never thought or how to take care of Wajir and the likes of Mandera and Nogaris and all these places. Some people believe that this is a wilderness area, a front. They used to call it problem. Northern Kenya, nothing except problems. But it's not so now. It is never again. It is actually a place now that actually the coming of devolution has become a blessing for us. Maybe the other Kenyans might not have realized the effect of devolution. But devolution today, we have actually benefited from devolution. However, there are many, many challenges and many needs. But of course, it has made changes in terms of development of infrastructure, in terms of, outreaches like health facilities, and many, many other places. But still, I want to urge all the governors to at least do more efforts, because the amount of money that reach this country, this region is such huge. And I'm sure it's going to make a difference for our lives if properly utilized. Honorable speakers, honorable members, and members of the guests from outside the county. You see, pastoralism per se is actually a very important undertaking in this country. As you're aware, the largest part, this is 70% of the Kenya's landmass, is actually under pastoralism. But however, much has not been done by successive governments. The only hope in these countries economy to grow double digit is actually to invest in the pastoral areas. Because you are seeing all of our other places, population is increased by the day. The land for production, crop, and all these things is reducing. And therefore, I want to urge also, I think the presidential advisors are some of them here. Please refocus if you want us to increase our economy and our production of livelihoods, especially for the pastoralists. So long as the people in the pastoral areas are poor, so long as they have a lot of challenges, Kenya will at least have a negative development, a negative production systems, and negative food production. Because if you look at, the other world, even in the developed countries, in the US and Europe, 9 months of their time is actually covered by ice and many other things. And they're not producing anything. But they're still surviving it. But this area that has been overlooked for many years is an area that is able for reproductive. The only thing is the availability of water. I'll give you an example. Today, we have the river Tana that flows 24/7. And every time it rains, when the Kayagen and everybody else release the waters to the river, many farms are washed, many houses have been demolished, and it has not been used. That water is just flowing through the water 24/7. It's a very simple technology that you can just create some dikes somewhere at the lower part of the river around Burra area, around Balambala and those places, and divert the water to the vast areas in Abasoine, Madagascar, and all these places and produce food. But this has not been done in many years. Honorable members, despite the many challenges, we also have marketing barriers. You see, the only source of economy that we have today here is the livestock. That's the mainstay here. But the markets are so much fetched out, this is actually far from here. The road is actually in poor situation. Hopefully, the Great North Road will be developed soon, as planned. And I hope when His Excellency comes, we'll be able to tell him the ABCDs of what our challenges are. Because animals are moved from here to Nairobi, because that's the end terminal market. And by the time the animals reach there, they are already carcass. Because they stay 3-4 days on a vehicle. Even the vehicle is not designed for livestock movement or livestock transportation. So I don't know where we're going to extend the SGR here, so that we can be able to carry our animals. One other thing, in every county, Wajir, Solo, Mandera, Garissa, the abattoirs that the government has spent so much money, the abattoirs are actually now idle. In Wajir, we have an international airport. If you fly the meat from here to any part of the Middle East, it's only 3 hours. Those guys will be able to receive fresh milk in 3 hours' time. But unfortunately, we wait our animals to die. And then what the government does is they just do a little intervention, restocking when the animals are already carcass. That is, an upside-down priorities. 2, if you look at the other side of the country, when there is glut production of food, maize, you have a GMT, a guaranteed minimum. The coffee have every 5 or 10 years, the coffee farmers are being given money to at least to compensate for their losses. The miraa, of all things, which is a narcotic drug, is given the other day when Somalia failed to take the miraa, and UK, when they banned it, they were given 1 billion shillings. There is no one time we get 1 billion shillings to compensate for the livestock farmers. That's a fact. And therefore, it is actually the onus on us now as leaders that we must come together and say that we must get also our fair share in this country. As pastoralists, we don't need to ask for food or handouts. We even don't need family relief. The relief that we spend, that being tracked to Wajir, Mandera, and everywhere, is actually, that amount of money is enough to take care of our compensation for the animals. You don't give us food on PS. We don't need free food. We can produce food. So this business of giving us is still maize. It's not a solution to our problem. Finally, I want to ask to join together the livestock marketing policy has been there since 2010 Parliament. It goes, return, goes to for signature. His Excellency, the former President Uhuru, signed the executive order on 2nd of June 2016. That policy has not been adopted up to date. We want us to have, as leaders, to join hands when His Excellency comes. We want that board to be mentioned and formed immediately, and let the President declare that we need to have board. Because if coconut will have its own marketing board, if perethrum of all places, small things like that, flowers, has its marketing board, if coffee has its marketing board, if mention is anything, but the livestock sector that takes care of 15 million people, that takes care of areas that land mass of 70% of the country, does not have a marketing board. With those few remarks, I want to challenge my colleagues. Please, let's open our eyes, let's unite and do things together. With those few remarks, thank you so much, and welcome all of you.
Thank you very much, Senator. And I'll take it back. Now, Dr. Ndi, you have your work cut out. You have heard my senator. Usually I say, in the Kenya where there is water, there is no land left. In the Kenya where there is land, there is no water. So just get water to the Kenya that has land, and we will not have to import food. Now we will begin our formal sessions for today, the plenary sessions, for discussing topical issues. And in the first session today, we'll talk about ending drought emergencies. EDE. Whenever pastoralists meet, drought mitigation is on the menu. And today that's the first meal. So we will be moderated by His Excellency Governor Nadif Jama, Governor of Garissa, Vice Chair of FCDC, and the Chair of the ASAL Committee of the Council of Governors. We'll give them, we will start with a 15-minute presentation. Please try and reduce it to 10 minutes because we're running behind schedule, by Mr. Paul Obunde as a highlight of the framework. And as he does that, or immediately after, because I think it's good you watch from there, the following panelists will come up here. The chair of NDMA. So the panelists will be Mr. Kelo Harsama, PS State Department of ASALs. I'm told Kano Hared Hassan, CEO of NDMA, is not with us, but his chair, Mr. Shallo Abdullahi, will sit in the panel. And then we have Dr. Guyo Malicha, the head of Jamil Observatory, to talk about the history of drought management as a panelist. Sorry. But will they not watch the presentation or they do it from up here? I'm guided that the panelists need to come up here so that immediately the introductory presentation is done, they can start their session. So, Governor, may I leave it to you? Please.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I think I can see a number of my colleagues. The panelists are already here on board. I can see PS Kelo Harsama, Dr. Guyo. All right, there you are. And then Honorable Mahmousi, are you there? It'll come later, all right? Okay, a chair, NDMA? Oh, wonderful. Okay, I think we have the team, the panels, I think, are all here. For what I believe is actually a topic worth starting for us. This very, very important forum of the Pastoralists Conference. The issue of drought management, as we all know, is probably one of the biggest headaches, actually, I should say, or rather drought, is no doubt is the single most damaging natural hazard in the ASAL counties. It destroys lives and livelihoods and undermines any developments that could be undertaken. Now, for many of us as the leaders in this region, whenever droughts hit, you know, we get really lost how to tackle the challenges coming with that. And that's why I think also the government of Kenya, recognizing the seriousness of the matter, has been giving attention to this matter of EDE or ending drought emergencies for the last several years. Let me give a summary of what the national government, the ideas that have been going around for many years now. From back in 2015, if not before, we had what was known as medium-term plans. We had, for instance, a medium-term plan, and I'm sure the panelists also will allude to that. We had a medium-term plan, a 5-year medium-term plan, 2015-2022, for ending drought emergencies by the year 2022. And then in 2018, another medium-term plan again was brought forward, or rather was put into place, 2018, another 5 years. So by 2022 again, drought emergencies should be brought to an end. Now, I just want to summarize for you as a background to appreciate what these EDE medium-term plans were rather aiming at. Let me just pick on 4 or 5 of the key pillars or thematic areas that EDE was supposed to tackle. Number 1, EDE, let me take the last one, 2018-2022. Number 1 was to strengthen alternative dispute resolution and traditional conflict resolution mechanisms. Because they said also the disputes in the pastoralist areas increases the troubles even during the droughts. So that pillar was aiming to see that there is much to be done in terms of sorting out the disputes in the pastoralist regions. I hope our team here, the panelists, will be able to tell us how much of that has been achieved. Pillar number 2, 2018-2022, was talking about climate, climate-oriented infrastructure for the region, or for the drought hit regions. For instance, it talked about the creation of permanent roads and also water by creating 4 large multi-purpose dams. It also brought forward the idea of huge tracts of land to be put under irrigation from 193,000 hectares to 480,000 hectares. Basically, more than double the lands that should be irrigated, in the ASALs for the sake of mitigating the drought emergencies. On human capital, pillar number 3 was talking about constructing or rehabilitating and equipping of 600 low-cost boarding primary schools in 14 ASAL counties. And it also discussed the idea of redesigning 100 existing mobile schools, primary schools. It also discussed establishing to establish and fully operationalize livestock export zones in different counties of the ASAL region. Pillar number 5 was discussing about scaling up the national livestock insurance scheme to all ASAL counties, and also to secure 8,000 hectares of land in 9 ASAL counties to increase production of fodder. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the background, or indeed the key pillars that EDE aimed to achieve by the year 2022. Now, I'm sure you'll all be asking yourselves, you'll all ask yourselves, 2022 now has gone by, where are we today? And that's, I think, the key question, or the key questions rather, to be addressed by our big team here, great colleagues here, who I think have been introduced very well. I don't need to repeat again introducing them. So let's now kick off the discussions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency. I know we have a great panel seated up here, and I know we have a strict time to manage. And I would want to request the presenter to strictly probably make the presentation within 7 minutes. And if you see me standing by your side, you know it's time up. Kindly, if you can come forward. This will be the presentation by Paul. Yeah, Paul he'll give us a highlight of the framework about the drought and what is happening. So your time starts now.
Yeah, thank you, Your Excellency. All protocols observed. I just want to run us through what we have as at now when it's come to the issue of ending drought emergencies. And Okay, so when it comes to the background, as has already been explained, the technical team, I think there's a problem, a technical problem. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so let me continue. So the background of this is that ending drought emergencies was to be implemented as part of implementation of sessional paper number 8 of 2012 of the National Policy for Sustainable Development of Northern Kenya and Other Red Lands. And also one of the key documents that was referred to was the Vision 2030 Strategy for Development of Northern Kenya and Other Red Lands, and also the Constitution of Kenya 2010. So, so I just want to run through what we have done and what is EDE first before we move on. EDE is a common programming framework or a strategy that is aimed at leveraging the strengths of different state and non-state actors and creating synergy between them, because it cuts across sectors, as already been presented earlier by the governor. There are so many sectors that are involved because you have to invest in the foundations for development. And as a result, one of the key things about EDE is coordination. So you must have a strong coordination at national level and also at the devolved levels. And also, EDE was to be used as a resource mobilization tool by all actors. That is, the state and non-state actors were to use this to mobilize resources and implement the priority interventions that are in their respective strategic plans. Then quite significant progress has been made, has already been highlighted earlier, and with this, although we have made some significant progress, okay, so we did not end drought emergencies by the year 2022 as we had anticipated. And as a result, development of the ED2 came into effect, where now both state and non-state actors were involved in the formulation of phase 2 of the ED. And it was to build on the gains of the phase 1 of the EDE. Then next is about the ED2 is to, its main aim is to secure the commitments of both state and non-state actors towards implementation of the ED2 and achievement of the goals of ending drought emergencies. It was also to build on ED2 by strengthening the coordination structures for ED and also to focus a lot on high-impact interventions. So ED1 had 6 pillars. We had, those had already been highlighted, but now ED1, the ED2, we are going to focus only 3 priority intervention areas. One of them is drought risk management, another one is investment in the foundations for development, and then thirdly, we have coordination, institution development, and knowledge management. So for each of these, if I can just focus on the investments in the foundations for development, one of the key investment area is called peace building, conflict management, and security. And as people will be going into groups, I think you will dig deeper into that. Then the second priority intervention area is dealing with climate-proofed infrastructure. And that climate-proofed infrastructure, that's where we have roads, we have water, and also we have energy. Then the third one is education and skills development. Issue of skills development came in because the ED1 was focusing only on education, but not on skills development. But we thought, the stakeholders thought that skills development is very critical. The fourth one is health and nutrition. The fifth one is food security, sustainable livelihoods, and trade. The issue of trade was coming in very strongly because it is very critical. Now, the sixth one is natural resource management, natural resources and environmental management. Those are the 6 investment areas under investment in the foundations for development. So, so there are a number of So I'm not going to go into detail for each of these. So under each of the key investment areas, we have highlighted, the stakeholders highlighted what are the priority intervention investment areas. And those interventions are as listed there. Then we have also, that is for drought risk management. Then for the peace building, we also have a number of interventions, one of them being early warning and early response hubs being established, security roads and all that. So there are a number of key interventions that have been prioritized under the ED2. So this will be looked at in the various groups. As you'll be going into the groups, you will have that. Now let me just go to the area of the budget. What is the budget of this? The estimated budget is 1.6 trillion for the 10 years because it's going to be implemented from 2023 to 2032. So for that particular one, we have a budget of about 1.6 trillion, with the bulk of that budget going into climate-proofed infrastructure, where we have the roads, water, irrigation, and a number of other interventions. Also, we have the coordination structures that have been set up. A number of interventions that have been set up, and then when it comes to implementation, it will be implemented through, at the national government level, it is going to be implemented through the Vision 2030 and also the strategic plans. At the county government, we have the CIDPs, which will be used to implement that. And also when it comes to the non-state actors are also going to play a key role in implementing it, using their strategic plans. And yes. Yeah, so what remains on the ED2? What remains is just the formal approval by the national government, county government, and also the development partners. So that is the key thing which is remaining on the, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that is the only thing which is remaining, the final approval. Yeah, so that is the budget. Then that is the coordination structures that are there. Then this is how it is going to be implemented. And finally, these are the next steps that are remaining. So, Chair, that is the brief I wanted to provide within the 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul, for that presentation. Honorable members in the room and guests and the participants, let me apologize because we are under time pressure. For these presentations, they will be shared and available online, so we cannot probably have the benefit to be able to engage in all the details. So for the speakers here and the speakers to come, we really have to manage the level of depth that we would want to have our presentation cover. So for that, I apologize that I have to stop you in a very hard way if you have to proceed with the presentation. Allow me now to ask our PA State Department of ASAL, Honorable Kelo Harsama to take the floor, and he has strictly 5 minutes to address us. Thank you. Sorry? It's your session? Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, please take over. Would you mind kindly? It's okay here?
All right, thank you.
Okay. Apologies, I took over the governor's session.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that good presentation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think you have heard both my intro and also the presentation by Paul. And I think it's now the right time to engage our great panel team here, starting, as was recommended, with our good our friend, our PS Kelo Harsama. PS, you are at the center of this big story about ending drought emergencies in this country. And I'm sure you know what is happening. I'm sure you are very aware of all the MTPs all the way from 2011. And they are all aiming ending drought emergencies by the year 2022. Where are we, PS, today as far as that matter is concerned? Karibu. As far as ending drought emergency is concerned, in general.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor. My name is Kelo Harsama, the Principal Secretary in the State Department of ASAL and Regional Development. The issue of drought management is a fundamental role of my State Department. And I want to say that in the past, for many years, drought management has never been proactive. We have always reacted to vagaries of drought, and our main role was just to provide relief food and rush to, drought-stricken areas, conduct barazas, talk a lot of things there, a lot of rhetoric, and come back. We have never had proper strategies in the past to proactively deal with drought. Now, this ending drought emergency is a new policy direction, which is actually aimed at proactive management of drought. I can use this. Proactive management of drought. As I said, many of you are aware that this area of ours has huge potential in terms of development, in terms of land, in terms of resources. And now, the strategy of EDE is to use these potentials to end emergencies. We are going to have more and more droughts in future. Actually, some of them may even be worse than the drought we had in 2021-2023. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong in having drought because we have the reality of climate change. But what is wrong is to accept drought to kill our animals, is to accept drought to kill our people, is to accept drought to lead to starvation of our people. Now the EDE strategy is to put in place measures to ensure that we are prepared for any drought. And one way of preparing is to ensure that we use the resources at our disposal to produce food for ourselves. The speakers who have been on the floor since yesterday have given us a lot of statistics. One by saying that ASA constitutes 80% of Kenya's land mass. And what is happening is that this government is planning to have ASAL areas as the next frontier for wealth of Kenya, as the next frontier for food production, as the next frontier for exploitation of all kinds of opportunities. We have the EDE plans to set up infrastructure, water infrastructure, to lead to dry land irrigation agriculture. And this was mentioned last night by all of you, that we have land. What we only need is water. The governor of Marsabit was very clear. He said we need mega dams to be established in all these places. And part of the EDE is to establish these mega dams so that the local pastoralists can produce their own food instead of relying on relief food. The senator of Wajir this morning was very clear. He said, what appears, we do not need relief food. Once we establish this program we are just talking about, the EDE, Wana Senator, Wajir County has a potential to produce food and send relief to Nyeri, and send relief food to Nyandarua, and send relief food to Kisii, which are now high potential areas. Why? While these ASAL counties still have massive land in those areas are now reducing. The richest man in Nyeri, the richest landowner in Nyeri, may be having only 10 acres, while the richest landowner in Wajir may be having 1,000 acres. So, once we implement these strategies to proactively deal with drought, we have a capacity to produce our own food. Secondly, the drought which happened between 2021 and 2023 killed more than 2.6 heads of cattle across northern Kenya and other 23 ASAL counties. The strategy in ED now is to say, even if drought comes, we should not lose our animals. How are we going to do that? We are having a policy program called feedlots across 30 counties in Kenya. We are going to establish more than 450 feedlots in these ASAL counties to establish 5,000 acres of land under pasture, which will also entail irrigation to grow grass for animals, so that we beat this monster of climate change. And therefore, thank you very much. That is the strategy entailed in the EDE. Thank you.
Thank you. PS, thank you very much. I think if I now can go to Mr. Shallow, the chair of National Drought Management Authority, or NDMA. Mr. Shallow, you have had the PS. And NDMA being the entity entrusted fully with matters managing drought, I think the question we are asking ourselves is that the strategies that the PS has mentioned have been there on the ground. They were planned as MTPs from 2011, and the motive or the objective was to end drought emergencies by 2022. So the question is, with all those great ideas, how many of them do you think have actually been implemented? For instance, we're talking about the PS, for instance, mentioned land for fodder or growing fodder, and that was already a plan which was meant to be fulfilled through 8,000 hectares of land in the ASALs. Has anything been achieved in that regard? The plans included by 2022, there should have been comprehensive national livestock insurance scheme to be implemented in the ASAL counties. How much of that has been achieved? You know, to the dams that we keep hearing or we keep talking about, how many of them have been achieved? Because these are the key interventions that were to be required to be implemented, and many more for that matter. Karibu, Mr. Shalom.
Thank you, Governor. Some of the questions I'll try to attempt, but others, my technical officer, Paulo Bunde, will assist me on why the issues that were mentioned were not attained. Number one is one of the biggest problems we are having in the EDE 2011-2023. There was a seed money of around 2 billion that was supposed to be allocated to NDMA. Out of that, what we were given is only 20 million for the last financial year. And that has not been, and in this financial year, nothing has been allocated because of the austerity measure we are having. But all the same, quite a number of interventions were done, and mainly on water harnessing by having a lot of dams, especially in areas like Tana River, a place called Kone. We've done a very big, massive dam that they are using it for growing fodder. On issues of insurance, I think that was taken into account, and Paul will give you a very good overview of how far we have attained that. Paul, you can.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that. And in fact, you have stated it very well that the implementation has been done through the medium-term plan, the 2 medium-term plans that we have had, and there were specific amounts that were expected to be mobilized. Because you know, the ending drought emergencies, the main issue is for each and every sector to mobilize resources and implement. So there are some components that are implemented by NDMA, just a very small part of it, maybe less than 1%. But mostly the implementation is done at the various sector ministries and also at the county level. So when we were doing the analysis, we noted that only up to about 60% of the resources that were required for the last medium-term plan, specifically for ending drought emergencies, were mobilized. So, and a good number, which means that we did not achieve what we wanted to achieve because all the partners did not, with state and non-state actors, did not mobilize adequate resources. And that's why under the ED2, there's a lot of focus on strengthening the coordination and strengthening resource mobilization so that each and every person can play a rightful role. During the previous ED1, also there were challenges of understanding what ED is. So some people thought that EDE is an NDMA project. So there was a bit of misunderstanding. So that's why under this new EDE, the main aim is for us to ensure that each and every person has equal understanding so that they know that they have their role to play in resource mobilization and ensuring that there is synergy in implementation. And if we do that, then we may find that we may end up mobilizing resources for up to 80 or even more % of what has been priority interventions that have been targeted, and some of which I've listed here, and some of which will be discussed during the other plenary sessions.
All right. Thank you. Let me go to Dr. Guyo. I think you are hearing where we are in terms of the discussions. It's good that you are an observer, or you run an entity that basically observes matters drought management in Kenya. What is your position on matters EDE, because really, targets were set. Many of them were, and the funding issues were all set and properly stipulated in those medium-term plans. But on the ground, I think we can say without fear of contradiction that we are not making much progress. So as an outside observer, give us your thoughts on what's happening.
Okay, thank you very much. I think my name is Guyo. I work with International Livestock Research Institute, and I coordinate a research program called Jamil Observatory for Food Security Early Action, which is basically research that questions why we are approaching drought from reactive point. There is evolution in artificial intelligence. There is evolution in data, analytics models to project things, and etc. So this is where we founded our research, and some of my colleagues are here who are supporting with documentation. So back to your question, Mheshimiwa, I think we are researchers, and sometimes researchers ask very hard questions. The hard question is that at the beginning of our research, we did something interesting, looking at when did we start actually establishing our system for responding to drought. And that dates back to mid-1980s when the Turkana Rehabilitation Project was established, very much within the humanitarian space. And thereafter, there are a series of projects that we have established an initiative to respond to drought, very much project-based and not institutionally established. But I think we also observe as drought became a political and economic question, in 2011, through the initiative by Honorable Elmi and others, we have made a home for drought responses, which is NDMA. And that is one of the good progresses where I think now the EDE framework is established. But I think a framework is a framework. It will only support you if you enable all the pillars of the framework. I think there's history from the EDE 1.0, where we had a fantastic document, but then we couldn't mobilize resources, we couldn't establish all the things required for all the pillars, and now we are drafting EDE 2.0, and I guess with the lesson from 2.1. And one of the greatest issues is that two things actually. One is the financing. You can have fantastic framework, fantastic data early warning, and bulletin, without commensurate financing to unlock, because drought don't wait for you. Drought is a creeping phenomenon, so it has a very discernible pattern of 6 months. If you don't mobilize your resources to move with that, to enable systems to respond, then it doesn't work. The second, I think, we're also stuck with our systemic problem, institutionally. The systemic problem is that we're still responding to drought as we are doing almost 20 years ago. And the data from the UNCCD shows that the drought phenomena after 1960, 70% of drought is happening after 1960. And the most severe droughts are known to happen after the year 2000, which means we are not going back to the old good day. We're still facing unprecedented drought situation in future, but our system is not positioned or moving with the same gravity that the drought requires. So I think for EDE, I think it's a very good mobilizing framework, but I think we need to be serious in how do we enable each of the pillars of EDE through resourcing, not only financial, but the capacity. We don't have situation rooms to look at drought phenomena. Today, artificial intelligence can allow you to see things as they happen. And if you go to ICPAC offices, you see a lot in terms of situation rooms and infrastructure for observing drought in the Horn of Africa. We could domesticate that kind of processes in our own country to look at drought in a very different way. So I think those two issues need to change. And I think thirdly, the way we package our data and the way we convey cannot be trusted by anybody, neither is it understood by people affected by drought. So we need to have a better packaging and dissemination of data so that people understand and use them to destock, to sell the animals in a timely manner, and to do something more timely. And lastly, I think, on the sphere of the anticipatory action, which means actually, in our, Ending Drought Emergency Fund, the regulation is very clear that we're supposed to do something quite interesting, which is spending 50% of our money before the drought. But resources are not there. The fund has no money to allow us to do that. So all those issues have to change in the way we resource, the way we build capacity, and the way we are serious in terms of implementing all the pillars of the framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before Just one more question for you before I pass on to Honorable Memusi. Do you think, Dr. Guyo, do you think that the development partners, and I can see, of course, you also run an NGO, the development partners were supposed to be key players in this field or in this space of drought management. There are accusations that they have not done well, or rather they have not prioritized drought, ending drought resilient programs. What is your take on that?
Thank you. I think the drought responses is the role of the government in terms of even establishing framework and also overseeing. I think the development partners, the best they can do is to align their resources to the priorities of the government, whether it's county or the national government. And I think resource being scarce, I think funding under the climate issues are also very, 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 very scarce. So I think for me, development partners need to be coordinated to align their resources and intervention to what government put as a priority. If the government is not in the driver's seat, then it will be hit and miss endeavor because people will put in money. I come from one of the largest county, which is Marsabit, and I've seen drought responses almost, number of NGOs have been increasing, but then the severity cannot allow those more resources, which are very much project approach. Project approach has a phase. It's just very short term, while government processes are long term. So I think for me, it's only fair to say development partners, they are very important players, but I think they have to be coordinated and their resources have to be aligned so that they complement what the county government or the national government is doing so that we have collectively responding to drought issue is not a single entity phenomena. And I think we need to capitalize on that. And I agree. I think even this gathering largely supported by development partners to have this conversation. So the policy makers and the policy holders, decision makers have to change their approach so that NGOs also are more accountable to the processes.
Thank you again. So development partners to align their interventions with that of the government. And that's why I think PS Harsama wanted to have a rejoinder on that. PS Karibu.
Thank you very much. My office, as PS ASAL, has mandate to coordinate NGOs and the other development partners. Part of why the ED1 failed was because of poor coordination and poor mobilization of resources through these development partners. And what we are going to do as government is to enhance coordination and to enhance mobilization of resources in a more thorough, in a more aggressive manner. I want to say that we have thousands and thousands of NGOs in ASAL counties. For example, in Turkana alone, we have 200 NGOs. In Marsabit, more than that number. In Wajir, I think more than 300 NGOs are operating from here. Some of them, if they tell you what they are doing, you will be shocked. I asked one of the NGOs operating in Turkana what they are doing. And you know what they told me? We are counting boreholes which are not functioning in Turkana. And what was the budget? 40 million Kenya shillings. Then I asked, doesn't Turkana have a county government? Doesn't Turkana have CEC water to count boreholes which are not functioning? Those are misdirected priorities. There is another NGO which told us they are operating in Kilifi. What are they doing? To promote baobab leaves for vegetables. So I asked them, there are people who are called Griama, who have lived with baobab for more than 300 years. Does it mean that they don't know the value of a baobab tree? Then you spend 70 million to tell people baobab has leaves which can be vegetables. Now what we are doing as a government is to align our priorities, the priorities of government and those of NGOs. They must work according to our agenda. Once these people are aligned, then we are going to have good results. Thank you.
Asante, PS. Finally, let me go to Honorable Mamusi, MP Kajiado Central. Mheshimiwa, I think you have a video to share with us. But before that, I can see your interest is in fodder production. And apparently, it's one of the big themes, or pillars rather, in all the medium-term plans of EDE, i.e. fodder production. Probably you have something to say about that, as to really whether it has worked under the EDE programs, and if not, what has happened. Yeah.
Thank you, Governor, and a very good morning to all of you. Assalamu alaikum. Asante. Governor, first of all, before I go into the subject, I want us to all answer one question: whether we really do believe that it is possible to end drought emergencies. Do you think it is possible? Yes. Do we all believe it is possible? Yes. Then, if we think that is possible, we need to ask ourselves, how do we go about this? All these things we are talking about, and I like what the PS Kelo Harsama said, that the drought is not the problem. And we are going to be facing drought every 2, 3, 4 years. The problem is, what are we doing about it? If I may just turn to you, all of us, and ask you, how many of us have cows? Cows, camel, how many of us are keeping? Almost everyone in this room. Now, it has been raining for the last 2, 3 years. The cows are enjoying the grass, and you know that this is not going to last more than 3 years. You know that. But does your cow know that? Do our cows know that there is going to be drought? They don't. So the cow is waiting for you to make a plan. What plan are you putting in place? That is my question. Now, we are talking about investment in our areas, which is a good thing. Yes, we need to negotiate. We need to push for more investment, especially water, in our area. Because without water, we do not have fodder. But again, what have we done with what we have? In Kajiado, for example, we have many water holes. We have boreholes, we have dams, that sometimes when drought strikes, we move and leave our boreholes idle. We migrate with our cows and leave our dams with water. So the question we are going to ask ourselves from this, if we're going to really end these drought emergencies, we must be practical. We must be practical in what we do. We must embrace technology. Our fathers, our grandfathers grazed animals in the open field. It's no longer tenable for us to do that. If you all have cows, as you have said you do, are you storing grass now that there's plenty? Are you embracing new technology? Are you finding out new fodders that are in place? What are you doing? Ama umeketi tu vile ng'ombe yako imekaa bila mpango yoyote? You know, this is the question that we must ask ourselves. And Governor, I think with those few remarks, I would want to demonstrate what I'm saying. I've practically done something, and I'm saying what I've done is on a very small scale. We can do this from county governments in a bigger scale. We can do this as national government in a bigger scale. And if we get to the fields practically, to sort the issue of fodder, there is no drought that will kill our animals. We keep talking about markets for our livestock. I don't think we are yet there. We are not yet there because Kenya currently is beef deficient. We are getting meat from outside this country. Come to my market in Kajiado on Friday, Bisil Market. You will find that out of 5,000 cows that are on that market, are coming from 3,000 are coming from Tanzania. Yeah? So we have not satisfied our own market yet. So let's not even talk about marketing our animals, because to me, I don't think we have those animals to market yet. Let us start with the basics, and the basics are, let us put fodder plan in place, and then our herds will grow, and then we'll be able to even talk about markets. Thank you. You can play the video.
In the last drought, we lost an estimated 3 million head of cattle. At the farm gate, 3 million head of cattle at 50,000 shillings is approximately 150 billion Kenya shillings. Without talking about a value chain, if we do value chain estimates, one cow can approximately give you 200,000 Kenya shillings. 200,000 Kenya shillings multiplied by 3 million is 600 billion Kenya shillings. What we've lost at farm gate prices is half of the Kenyan budget that is given to county governments. We've talked about what we've lost. It's not all lost. We still can mitigate against these losses. We can save these animals. If exported, the 600 billion can even go to 1 trillion. That is enough money to pay for our debts that the country is currently facing. I've not talked about the employment that this sector has potential to sort out the unemployment issue for our youth. I urge from the national government to county governments, let's relook at the livestock sector, let's invest, and most importantly, let's be practical. Let us stop these boardroom meetings. Let us stop these stories that we are having in hotels. Let us go and do these things practically. What I've done here is small. It is fodder on 25 acres. We can talk of 1 million acres. If we do fodder as a government, county governments, national governments, 1 million acres, 1 acre of this fodder is able to feed 20 cows, 1 acre. If we do 1 million acres across the 15 counties, pastoral counties, we will be able to feed 20 million heads of cattle. We do not even have 20 million heads of cattle. So it means we'll be able to even export fodder as a business out of the country. From the fodder banks that you've seen, one fodder bank is able to store up to 150,000 kilos of feed. If you are feeding your animals to fatten, you would be doing about 10 kilos of fodder. If you're feeding them to sustain them, not to die, you'll feed about 4 to 6 kilos. And one whole is able to sustain more than 300 head of cattle for more than 6 months. I have done 7, and the 7 we will be able to sustain about 2,000 heads of cattle for 6 to 8 months without rains. County governments can do this at a bigger scale. The national government can do this at a bigger scale. Currently, we are not short of land to do this. We have existing public water holes, dams that are idle. We have boreholes that are idle. So let's just go out to the fields and do this. Let's be practical. It is doable. I have done it. It can be done.
There has not been any new MTP. What I think I saw is there is an NDMA strategic plan of 2023-2027, which talks in some areas about EDE. What does that mean? If indeed we had MTPs dedicated to EDE, and now we're talking about a strategic plan for NDMA with some discussions on EDE, can we say that we're almost giving up?
Yeah, thank you for your very good observation. The MTP4, the Medium Term Plan 4, was consolidated. So we don't have the sector-specific medium term plans. So this really brought quite a big challenge for the EDE. So what we did after we had developed this common program framework, the ED2, what we did, we sat down with all the sectors and also various players. So we have produced a 5-year plan, which is like our MTP for ending drought emergencies, detailing what we have in the ED2. So that's a stopgap measure that we decided to do. So our sector leads from all the ministries, we sat down with them, so they were picking information from their various strategic plans. Because ED is not for NDMA. It has to be implemented by all sectors. So they picked what they have in their respective sector plans, whether it is roads, whether it is education, health. They brought all that together so that we come up with a consolidated 5-year plan for ending drought emergencies. So we have that plan, Bwana Governor.
Yes, why we did that is because in the ED1, it looked like it was NDMA that was doing everything. But now these interventions are supposed to be done by many players and some non-state actors. So that's why we felt we have to do the coordination part, but it has to be owned by everybody else. That's why we've come up with that strategy. Thank you.
Okay, I think as we conclude, let me get just your final thoughts in few seconds so that we give space to the other plenary. Mheshimiwa, we can start from your side.
Thank you. I don't have much to add. I think the video is self-explanatory. But I just want to challenge all of us. We, as pastoralists, we've really grown. We've grown in terms of professionals. We have our own very good doctors, learned people who our communities are looking up to for solutions. We have our mothers back in the villages, our brothers who have not gone to school properly, whose livelihood, only livelihood, is their livestock. I want to urge all of us to go back to their villages and showcase something that your exposure, out of your education, out of your traveling, that your exposure can give back to your villagers, and make sure that in your village, nobody migrates because of drought. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr.
Okay, thank you very much. I think on my end, the critical thing is we have made a quite good effort in terms of institutional establishment to make a home for drought responses. But I think globally, the drought responses is shifting towards what we call anticipatory action. which is taking early action advantage that data and artificial intelligence will going to give us for predicting fodder, for predicting drought phenomenon, etc. So I think as you look at EDE2 and beyond, we need to invest really in terms of resources early enough. We need to invest in systemic shift and improvement so that we, I think, move from the old paradigm of reactive responses to drought to more timely early actions so that we learn both at the county level and the national government level. I think the second thing is also we need to improve on the coordination, because I think largely when emergencies strike, it becomes very expensive. And coordinating people at that point is very difficult. So I think for me, in terms of resilience building, the nexus between humanitarian response and development has to be relooked, and we need to have a framework that should link the two together so that we address both the political question and also the economic question of drought. Thank you.
PS Asante.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say that Mheshimiwa Memusi actually deserves a standing ovation next time when he speaks about this. This is exactly the meaning of ending drought emergencies. In his farm, there is no drought emergency. Do we have a drought emergency in Memusi's farm? We may have a drought next year. We do not have those we do not want to have those emergencies anywhere in these counties. As I said, the government intends to establish feedlots, which is a replica of what Memusi is doing in his farm. At break time, I have asked to meet the governors in the governor's lunch so that we speak about how fast they can quickly establish this feedlot program in their counties. We are going to start with 10 counties, the frontier counties, as a priority so that they pick up and end drought emergencies in their counties. Finally, I want to say this government is your government. For the first time, the president has told us, tell your people you have a government which you can say is my government. Let us take advantage and share our thoughts and issues with this government to solve your problems. For example, there has never been a time when the government has funded the Pastoralist Leadership Summit. Today, the government, through the State Department of ASAL and Regional Development, has facilitated this forum with 12 million Kenyan shillings. This is the beginning of recognition of pastoralists in this country. It means that this government recognizes the rights of the pastoralists. And finally, we are accessible. Actually, we are seriously available in our offices. You can access the president 24 hours from Wajir. You can access my office 24 hours. In fact, in my office, we have established a mosque so that if it is 1 o'clock and a Muslim wants to pray, anaingia hapo kando anaomba. Has that happened before? Has that ever happened in this country? No. That is the beginning of how you are recognized in this country. Take advantage, let us think together, and let us act together. Thank you.
Asante, PS Chairman.
Thank you, Your Excellency. As been said by the other facilitators, I will just want to add one thing. We've been shown it is doable, and drought is not an emergency. So the only thing that I want to tell tell my colleagues here is it is doable. Please, let's do it. How do we do it? Let's come together, put our heads together, and make sure that whenever we're having excess water, we harness them. We get enough dams, especially for the county governments and all the NGOs. That should be the way forward. And in the end, we will walk the talk and give this country, make it a better place. We have a government that is listening, a government that at the end of the day has the pastoralist at heart. Let's make use of this avenue and make it a better place. Thank you.
David, anything? Are you done? I think your chairman has spoken. All right, I think to conclude, and I think also the view of the governors in this region is that NDMA and for that matter PS, I think to echo the words of the chairman, Shallow, that we need a forum where we discuss this matter in a better way. I mean, even when you look at the NDMA strategic plan, they're still talking about the same, dealing with ED, or rather ED matters, the same way it was being discussed in the first MTP. PS, we cannot expect to be doing the same thing and expect a different result. I think we need a better discourse. We need a much more serious engagement as county governments, as national government, and even discuss where should the ownership of ED be placed. Is it with the national government or with the county governments, which are, of course, where drought most hits and where the first response is called for. So I think my take is that we need a serious, urgent discourse and discussion on this matter. Asanteni sana once again for your great time. And I hope that we will have a private session with as governors together with the team here, so we can agree on the way forward. Thank you very much. Asanteni.
Yeah, let's give them a clap, both for the chair, moderator, Honorable Nadif, and the panelists. The experts have done very well. Can you give them a hand of applause? We cannot be mean by clapping when they've given us so much information. Can we do a hand for the panelists and the chair, the moderator, for work well done? So, ladies and gentlemen, we are trying to catch up with time, and if you look at your time, you realize that we are already on our break time, or our tea break, but this was also mainly for our health break, right? So I want to ask to negotiate, because the next session that will come up is very interesting session that will talk about some of the elements that touches on issues of financing and how things are for now. And the development financing of the pastoralist areas will have the benefit of having our experts, Dr. Ndi, among others, who will be able to facilitate that session. So, ladies and gentlemen, our honorable members in the room, I would like to check whether you would wish to proceed for a 10-minute break, or we have the capacity to hold on for this next session so that we can catch up with time and we can be back on track as per our program. For those of the opinion that we hold on, can you say aye? Aye. May those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. So, it is my pleasure to introduce the person who will usher in this session, the next session, and this would be Madam Sarah Korere, who is our Secretary General for the PPG and also a Member of Parliament. Madam Sarah, where are you? Yeah, can we give her a hand of applause as she comes up the stage? And kindly, as we want to take maybe some health break at a personal level, let's ensure that we are not interruptive. As I said, the next session is equally very interesting, just as the first one. So let's accord adequate attention to the conversation. Madam, please, you have the floor. Kindly help me keep time.
So, the moderator, yes. So, end of the moderator to follow the presentation and. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon or morning? Salam alaikum. We are going to session 4, which is development financing of the pastoralist areas of Kenya. The main moderator will be Dr. David Ndi. And we'll have the following panelists from the Ministry of Treasury. We'll have Francis Anyona, Mr. Raphael Owino Otieno, and Ronald Musundi. We'll also have in the same session on ASAL policy and practice from the independence, we'll have the CRA team. So CRA team, please be on standby. So I think without much ado, I'll call Dr. Ndi and the panelists. Dr. Ndi, please. Let him be joined here by Francis Anyona. Francis Anyona, please. Raphael Owino Otieno. Ronald Musundi.
Francis Anyona is not in.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean.
So I'm told Francis Anyona is not in, but his colleagues will properly stand in for him. Over to you, Dr. Ndi. So on stage also, kindly let's have Dr. Ekuru Aukot, Dr. Ekuru Aukot, Vincent Ombaka, Mrs. Chebukati, Chair CRA, and Mahabub Malim. And His Excellency Governor Isa Timami will moderate that group. So please.
Yes, this is my slide. Yeah, there are only two slides. Okay, sawa. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hamjambo. Assalamu alaikum. This is a session that was going to be on development finance. I think we are going to be joined by a team that was going to talk on policy. The two are fairly close, so I think that's fine. Again, I am doubling up and representing both the presidency as well as the CS Finance, who was going to make a keynote presentation. But he was unable to come, but the Treasury is ably represented by Raphael there. Personally, I am very delighted to be here. It is my first time in Wajir, but I have a very intimate association with advocacy for pastoralism, those who might know. I have done this for many, many decades. So it is really, really a momentous occasion for me to stand in front of you, and it tells us how far we have come. 25 years ago, when you talked about pastoral economy, Uko Kenya, people looked like you had some strange things. But now the fact that we are here and we are talking about the potential of the pastoral economy tells us that we have moved some distance. I will make just an overview, framing of the issues that we are here to discuss in terms of the challenges of unlocking financing. Those numbers might, I don't know whether they are speaking to you already, but I want to unpack them and to tell you why financing the pastoral economy and the historical underinvestment in this region, what explains it, and what it is that we need to do to unlock that problem, and what we are doing to unlock that problem. I have on that slide what you might call a tale of two counties, but in fact, you might want to call it a tale of two countries. They're different countries. So I will preface this with a historical comment. The French colonialists had classified, they had a colony called Chad. You're familiar with Chad. So they divided Chad into two. One was called Chad utile in French, and the other one was called Chad inutile. Useful Chad and useless Chad. We did not use that terminology, but our colonialists had exactly the same mindset. Useful Kenya and useless Kenya. So we are now in what was previously useless Kenya. What explains the mindset that we had at independence, which we translated not as useful and useless, but as high potential and low potential. So it was very difficult and we codified that in policy and in the KANU Manifesto and in the section of paper number 10 of 1965. I have written extensively about the battle of repealing that section of paper. It started with Moi in the early 80s, changing and talking about ASALs and all sorts of things, the word which had never been there in our lexicon. And I think ultimately we repealed that section of paper and our new 2010 constitution, at least institutionally. Now, because we repealed that section of paper in the constitution, although through devolution, we are able to compare the economies of two counties in the country, which we could not have been able to do before. There was not possible to have an evidence base to the conversation that we are having today. We would have had no evidence base. Now we have an evidence base that we can argue. Now, I want us to focus on a couple of things. One, if you look at economic potential of Marsabit and Kirinyaga, there is no contest. Marsabit has 15,000 square kilometers of arable land. Kirinyaga has 800 square kilometers of arable land. And by the way, arable land, I understand in Marsabit, they classify land which has about 1,000 millimeters of rainfall, which you have there. Obviously, Kirinyaga rainfall is much higher. But the point is, Israel has an average rainfall of 600 millimeters. Israel's arable land, Israel as a whole is 20,000 square kilometers. It is just slightly bigger. It is just 25% bigger than the arable land in Marsabit. Of course, Marsabit is much bigger. But Israel's arable land is only 4,000 square kilometers. And Israel exports $8 billion worth of agricultural produce. That is equivalent to our total exports. The only thing, and of course that's after their internal. So the question of potential, so what is the problem? Why don't we have this potential? If you look at what's happening, Kirinyaga has a population density of 445 million people per square kilometer. Marsabit has a population density of 7 people per square kilometer. So, when you want to invest and you are making investment decisions politically, then you run into a return on investment problem. 1 kilometer of road in Kirinyaga, if you do 1 kilometer of road across that 1 kilometer kind of area, assuming that voters are 50%, you reach 200 voters. If you do 1 kilometer of road in Marsabit, you reach 3 voters. So, if you are allocating resources politically, with a mind with an eye to voters, and democracies allocate resources politically, make no mistake about it, you run into the one man, one vote, all manner of issues. So you can see where it comes from. Yeah, so you have a political problem of misalignment of where your economic potential is and where your votes are. Yeah, that's number one. The other variable I want us to focus on is at the bottom. The last one, it says that that is the gross county product. I think you're familiar with that number. It's equivalent of GDP at the national level. So the gross county product per square kilometer in Kirinyaga is 100 million shillings. The gross county product in Marsabit is 1 million shillings. So the output per square kilometer in Kirinyaga is 100 times the output per square kilometer in Marsabit. Then now you run into a problem which we call the tyranny of geography. So that if you are talking about putting an electricity transmission line and you are looking at it to do across Marsabit from south to North Hor all the way, it's about 1,000 kilometers, and you are calculating a return on investment of that transmission line versus a transmission line from Sagana to the Fathers, which is across Kirinyaga County, where you can actually cycle in 1 day or less, then you run into a return on investment problem in the short term. So, the way we went about solving these two problems, recognizing them as historical problems, was to do something we call the Equalization Fund. Actually, the first name we proposed in the Constitution was Restitution Fund, but it was resisted very seriously by various people who did not want it to imply they had liability for the historical injustices that, that existed. So we settled on Equalization Fund. But the whole idea of Equalization Fund was to take some infrastructure investment away from those two problems. The tyranny of numbers and the tyranny of geography. That was the, said, if you leave those investment decisions to be made in that system, they will continue falling foul of the problems that we have had in the past. But also devolution. The fact that devolution, we created a system of ensuring that some resources go to the counties on constitutional grounds. It must be a minimum of 15%, but based on certain criteria. So there was a huge change there. That's when I say it is the 2010 Constitution that repealed sessional paper number 10 of 1965. Now, but as was observed by Honwetangula yesterday, some people started looking at the equalization fund with the binoculars, and instead of putting this money where the Constitution says, in large infrastructure projects and massive projects for historically marginalized areas, we started finding marginalized pockets everywhere. I think the leaders of some of these regions also did not help, because they looked at the equalization fund from the lens of the CDF, and we replicated the CDF model. I think that's something conversation that we need to have. So the conversation we are having today is, why does the tyranny of geography and the tyranny of numbers still continue to whatever? Part is because of whatever's of our own making. And you can see the clawback. The clawback is still there. Every so often, the noise around one man, one whatever, keeps flaying up. So these are political major contests. But I want to see what has been the impact. The impact of the repeal of that sessional paper number 10 and that model of high potential, low potential. I want to focus on the GCP growth, the growth, economic growth from 2018 to 2022. And you can see there, over the last 4 years, those 4 years of data, the Marsabit economy was growing at 10% per year. Ranked fastest growing county in the country. And Kirinyaga was growing at 3.5%, which is ranked 44. Now, that is very standard economics. Poor countries or poor regions grow faster than wealthier ones, because the less capital you have invested, the higher the productivity of capital, yeah? What do you mean? Oh, it's the other way around, sorry. It's the other way around. Marsabit is 10, Kirinyaga is 3.5, but I'll show a chart anyway, so that will be soon corrected. The next thing you want to look at is the workforce growth. Over the next decade, Kirinyaga's workforce will grow by 14%, and Marsabit's workforce will grow by 40%, 3 times. And one of the other big driver of growth in low-income countries is workforce, the labor force. Growth is a combination of 2 things: the growth of your workforce and investment. And investment, the lower the capital base, the higher the growth rate. Because the returns to capital are higher. The scarcer the resource, the higher the return. That is standard economics. And that was the blind spot of the high potential, low potential, not recognizing that the less developed areas actually have higher potential for growth than the poorer developed areas. But I wanted to say it is not just an artifact of Marsabit by some reason. If you go to the next slide, if you're able to go to the next slide, it's the last one. I only have 2 slides here. So if you look at, it's the same data. So if you look at this side, the fastest growing counties over the last those 4 years, you can get this data. It's published by KNBS. You can just download the report on the KNBS website. You can see Marsabit out there, but if you look at the counties next to it, the fastest growing counties, if you can see them, there's Mandera, there's Tana River, there is Isiolo, there's Kajiado, Busia, Turkana is also there. Those are the fastest growing counties. If you go to the other end of the scale, who do you see? Nyandarua, Meru, Nyeri, Embu, Kericho. I am sure this is not the way we are used to thinking about our economy. Yeah, but this is totally consistent with economic theory. This is what devolution is doing. So if you are looking for evidence of that taking capital where you have very little capital, you get much higher return. If you go back and remember the numbers on land, which was mentioned before, today, arable land per person in Kirinyaga, 0.3 acres, arable land in Marsabit, 7 acres. How do we then overcome the tyranny of geography? The way we have been doing it, and to get to the point where the conversation about investing in pastoralism has traction, is to change the language of investing in the northern Kenya and the pastoral areas from the language of redressing historical injustices to the language of opportunity. The language of potential and the language of opportunity. It is similar to the conversation you have in the climate change, where some people are talking about, what do you call it, loss and damage compensation, historical injustices, restitution, vis-a-vis the opportunity for investment and contribution to whatever. So, how do we do that? Let me frame one of the arguments that we have used, numbers, to demonstrate using pastor, and that's the last thing I'm going to say. We slaughter on average 2.5 million cattle from pastoral, all of it virtually offtake from the pastoralist herd per year. That's our beef production. Value about 100 billion shillings, just about the same as tea. Horticulture is slightly higher. But livestock is among the top 3 in terms of value of agricultural production. Again, just go to the economic survey, go to the chapter on agriculture, go to value of marketed production, just look at the numbers. They are there staring at you. Now, if you think about it, that offtake we do every year with 0 investment. So these animals are browsing. There is no difference between off-taking those animals from the herd and poaching. You know, because there's only that poaching is illegal. Otherwise, you could just as well harvest antelopes because you have not invested. While, if you look at the infrastructure we have put to get an industry like horticulture or tea to produce about the same output, it is phenomenal. So the question you want to ask is, what if we invested in pastoralism instead of hunting the animals and taking them to the market? Because we chase them from the herd, we take them out, and we rush them to sell. There is 0 investment. So if you actually take out the investment from the other sectors and you get the net output of pastoralism is much higher. Because they are just browsing and using the rangelands. Now, simple illustration of what investment can do. The average carcass weight of the animals we take to market is 100 kilos. The potential of Zebu cattle, if you look at Botswana cattle, which are the same, is 170 kilos. So every animal we take off the herd, take to Susua market or Garissa market, put it on a truck, take it straight to the slaughterhouse when it has even lost more weight than it had. Yeah? If you took that animal, and a few people do that, and take it through a feedlot, finishing for 3 months, they're going to gain 50 kilos. Okay? 50 kilos times 2.5 million animals is 125,000 metric tons of beef. You can do that calculation. If you value this at 400 shillings per kilo, low-end butchery price, that's about 50 billion shillings. So by investing in finishing our animals, we can add to the livestock annual GDP 50%. add 50 billion shillings. Now, the way we go about making investment decisions is to look at what's the rate of return on investment. Now, the hurdle rate for public infrastructure projects, which we use with the World Bank, AFDB, what is the cost of capital that makes a project viable is 12%. So if you ask, if your annual return is 50 billion shillings, what is the investment requirement that would make that project viable? How much should you invest so that that project is viable and it makes the hurdle rate? Or just, it's not complicated. You take 50, divide by 0.12, which is the hurdle rate, and you arrive at 400. So it is worth investing 400 billion shillings so that we can increase the value of GDP coming from livestock from 100 to 150 billion, so that you can increase the carcass weight of every cow by 50 kilos before you sell it. Now, that means you have to feed those cattle. That means that you need, how much fodder do you need to feed those cattle? Now, that is the conversation that led to the program that the PS talks about investing in feedlots. Note, the language is about investment to get a return. It is not about history, geography, what happened before. It is simply saying there is a huge opportunity here to raise productivity. It is what Memusi is doing. And I think that is not the only, but it's a huge part of why we have not been able to have a national conversation. Because we have not been having a win-win conversations. What we have been having is zero-sum conversation. If you get, I lose. If the money goes to Turkana, Kiambu loses. That is not the way the economy works, unfortunately. But there's a way people whose job is to allocate the resources politically think. You know, if it doesn't come to my constituency, it is lost. If your acreage in Kirinyaga is 0.3 per capita, and most of it is tea, you should not be able to feed yourself in Kirinyaga. Yeah, it is not rocket science. Where is the land? It's in Marsabit. How then do we sit at the table with Marsabit to talk about unlocking that potential? I think that's a huge part of the reason we've been struggling. And it doesn't change everything. I think 2 points, if you have to take away, is obviously we can demonstrate. We have proof of concept. This is proof of concept. This GDP growth adds to the GDP of the country. And I can tell you, whatever you do, the ASAL countries, regions, will continue growing faster because that's the way economies work. Once you integrate and you have whatever, you get what you call economic convergence. So our growth potential now, we have reached at the point where our growth potential is in ASAL places. Our food security is in ASAL. The geography of useful Kenya and useless Kenya we should leave behind. The geography, the politics of who has more potential than who is not a conversation we should be having in this today. I think the conversation we need to have from now on, because 10 years on we can see it. The future is telling us is how do we. So thank you very much. I hope we have the time to have, and how do we reframe this conversation and talk about the institutions and the vehicles for unlocking and channeling capital into these places. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndi, for the expertise and the information you've given us. Let me make a slight announcement that probably you might be wondering how comes the panel has expanded significantly. Because of some technicalities, we had to merge a session 6 panelists to this particular session. So kindly allow us to make that adjustments, and requesting that Dr. Ndi will be facilitating a more broader conversation with our panelists on stage. But before that, I would like to give a 5 minutes opportunity to Madam Mary to be able to make a presentation on from CRA. Please, if you could kindly keep time, and then we'll take it back to you, sir, for moderation. Thank you. Okay. Before I give her the opportunity, I would like to request Dr. Okuru Aukot, if you are in the room, kindly make your way to the stage. We would like also to benefit from your expertise. His presentation was made for tomorrow, but for those technical issues, we have to take the presentations and the conversations now. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Okay, my presentation is already up. I was going to write on the fact that it would take time to put it up, and just say that when I was invited to come to Wajir, I was a bit worried because I had never been to any of these counties in this region. But I got comfort in the fact that the chair of the Council of Governors and the other governors, I have been interacting with them as we develop the formula.
The machine may not work, so if you want the next slide, just say next.
Okay. And that gave me comfort that I was in very safe hands. So when I left Nairobi and landed, unfortunately I landed at night, so I didn't even know where I was going. But this morning I woke up to a very, very beautiful environment. I was very excited. Congratulations, the governor of Wajir. But I was also in the comfort that since my Commissioner Mheshimiwa Fatuma Gedi comes from here, the worst case scenario, I would just go and sleep in her sitting room if there was nowhere else to go. Otherwise, thank you very much for having us here. I will move very fast. I want to start by saying that I'm just here to give you a brief on the marginalization, how we identify the marginalized areas as the Commission on Revenue Allocation. That will be the outline of my presentation, the mandate, the allocation, the first, second, and third policies. The next slide, please. So our mandate is very clear. We draw a mandate from the Constitution, Article 216, sub-Article 4, where the CRA is to determine the policy which it sets out the criteria by which to identify the marginalized areas for purposes of Article 204.2, which says that Article 204 establishes the Equalization Fund to be used to provide basic services, including water, roads, health facilities, and electricity to marginalized areas to the extent necessary to bring the quality of those services in those areas to the level generally enjoyed by the rest of the nation so far as possible. The allocation to the fund is 0.5% of the approved audited accounts of the revenue of a particular year. Now, quickly, I'll not go too much into detail, but you can see a table there. Column 1 is the financial year. This is the year that would be the year to have the allocation. The reference year is the year for what I've just said, the audited approved accounts. The figure we rely on is the audited approved accounts of that year. The current audited approved accounts is 2020-2021. The next column is the audited approved accounts amounts, and the allocation, the respective allocation, and finally the amounts that were allocated in those years. If you notice the color in blue, those 3 years, the appropriation should have been done, but to date has not yet been done, of 7.64 billion for some reason, but I hope you'll see it later. The gray color, if you can see it as gray, those years from 2014-15 to 2016-17, there was a 12.44 billion that has been appropriated and that went towards the first policy. Now, because the first policy, when we went to the second policy, which began on 2017-18 to 2020-2021, which is now the one that was recently launched. For those who were in KICC, the Equalization Fund Board launched some projects which are supposed to be starting anytime soon. Already the monies have been appropriated, that 23.76 billion that you see there. So our prayer is that once those projects have been implemented and some advanced work has been done, we may then consider the third policy. So you can see the yellow band, which is 2021-22 to 2024-25, that no amount has been appropriated because we don't have a third policy yet. Next. So what happened in the first policy? It was developed in 2013, and it appropriated the 12.4 billion for the years 2014-15 to the year 2016-17. And how were these areas identified? What was used then was the county was the unit of analysis. So that is what was used for identification of the marginalized area, a county. Now, what approach was used? There was a perception survey on marginalized area, and this was just a matter of taking up, doing a survey from Kenyans as to which areas they think are marginalized. The next approach that was used was the historical injustice report, which the CRA then had developed. And finally, the county development index. So based on the triangulation of all this data, the following counties in the next slide were identified as marginalized. That was Turkana, Mandera, Wajir, Marsabit, Samburu, West Pokot, Tana River, Narok, Kwale, Garissa, Kilifi, Taita Taveta, Isiolo, and Lamu. So 14 counties were identified in the first policy as marginalized. Next, please. So that is the allocation. I will not put you through that table in the interest of time, but just for your interest, you can see Turkana. There was a weighting of 50% was shared equally. The other 50% was based on the county development index that I had mentioned earlier. Next slide. So the first policy, that is how the money was shared out, the 12.4 billion we saw, with Garissa 6.64. The highest amount actually went to Turkana at $1,050,200,000, and the lowest went to Isiolo at to Lamu at 722,200,000. Next slide. So the second policy, the approach was slightly different, and this policy was for sharing resources in 2017-18 to the year 2020-21. Now the approach here changed, and it changed to an area of analysis. We changed from a county to a sub-location. There were 7,131 sub-locations across 47 counties in 2009. And how were these areas identified? There was a deprivation index that was used, and it was based on the following parameters: access to safe drinking water by the community, use of improved sanitation, household use of electricity, primary school attendance rate, and the secondary school attendance rate. Next. So in identifying these marginalized areas, which I had mentioned, the 7,031 sub-locations, 20% were picked to be the marginalized ones. So a total of 1,424 areas were identified as marginalized. In the 1,024 areas, those come from 34 counties, 111 constituencies, and 366 wards. Fast forward, please. Next. And next. So what happened, as I mentioned earlier, in the first policy, for some reason, the first 3 years, the 7.4 billion was not disbursed. So the second policy took it up, identified, developed as an addendum, which was now used to share the 7.6 billion for the 3 financial years that had not been shared earlier in the first policy. And that was based on the earlier 14 counties that had been defined as marginalized. Next. So that is the map of the marginalized area. Next. And how the money was shared out. You can access this later on. Next. So that's how the money, the appropriation was done, with Turkana now at, this is the second policy, at 2.626 billion, and Isiolo being the lowest at 380. Sorry, there's a next slide. And yes, so the total of 23.76 billion was shared out among the 34 counties to the 1,424 areas. You can see the kind of money that was being shared out. Like Muranga ended up with 13 million, 14 million. So these were very, very small amounts of money that were being allocated. Next. And next. So the third policy, that's where I think it gets a bit more concerning. So a draft policy was prepared in September 2022. This had been done by the Commission before the third Commission came into office. And the policy adopted the same methodology used to determine marginalized areas under the second policy. That is, again, they were going to the sub-location level. Now, from a list of 8,886 sub-locations, the draft policy defined 1,778 sub-locations as marginalized. However, when the third commission came in and subjected this policy to the stakeholders, very serious engagement, public participation, next, we received a lot of feedback. And feedback was that the unit of analysis in defining a marginal area was too small. Identification of marginalized areas in well-to-do counties goes against the spirit of Article 204. Another thing was spreading of the money thinly to too many projects will not result in any meaningful impact on service delivery in marginalized areas. And I think you've been hearing this discussion going on. Is there an impact when you now decide to identify marginalized areas at that level? So we are undertaking further stakeholder engagements before we finalize the third policy, that we are working on it. And we are engaging very closely. We will continue engaging to ensure that by the time we release the third policy, which we believe by that time the second policy should have been implemented, because it doesn't make sense coming up with a third policy, yet the second policy projects have not even been implemented. In the interest of time, I want to say thank you very much. I can see my dear lady next to me, and I will request Commissioner Fatuma Gedi to please come and sit in the panel. Thank you very much. Good day.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And as I said, apologies that we don't have much time. So I want now to pass the baton to Dr. Ndi for facilitation and helping us moderate the expanded part of the conversation with the other panelists. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I am not a great user. Can you hear me? Is it working?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. You know, I am not a great user of these things, so when we use them, we always have to be corrected by politicians, because they are the ones who are very expert users. We are going to do two things. We have a fairly large panel. That obviously means that we have to control time. So we are going to first do 1 minute introduction by each panelist, and then each panelist is going to have 3 to 5 minutes, and you clap for the person who does 2 minutes. Anybody who does more than 2, we don't clap. To react to the presentation that from my observation, particularly the CRA, because that is where the big questions are on the equalization fund money. And then the faster we finish, so that we can have a substantive plenary. I think if we manage our time well, give ourselves up to 1:30 to break for lunch, we should be able to have about half an hour or thereabouts of 40 minutes of discussion by the panelists, and at least 45 minutes, preferably an hour, of our plenary. So I start on my right, because there is a lady at the end of the table. So 1 minute introduction, and then we come round and you make your comments. Oh, no mic on that end, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Fatuma Gedi, Commissioner CRA. I chair Revenue Allocation Committee, which hosts the Marginalization and Equalization Fund and Transition Equalization, Matters Formula, everything that is so dear to the pastoralist group. I thank you.
My name is Tripat Mangat. I'm an engineer, but I'm also an entrepreneur and representing the private sector here to see how the private economy and private money can be used to be leveraged with government money. So my perspective is to see the private sector and see what technologies are emerging, because there are. There's so many technologies emerging, from M-Pesa to satellite dishes, etc. I will come back to it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ekuru Aukot. I'm one of the 4 consultants under the TRINC project. I was tasked to look at the legal framework together with my colleague Vincent. He's looking at the policy, I'm looking at the legal framework on the equalization fund. And of course, our report is already out. That's courtesy of Professor Itle Farah, if he wants to share. We are prepared to come and give you a longer presentation, but political expediency dictates otherwise.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Rafael Owino Tieno, currently the Director General of the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury. I'm not an expert in pastoralist economics, but I'm here to listen to the experts and the people on the ground to see what is it that we can do together to mobilize resources and utilize them effectively in developing the pastoralist economies.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, my name is John Githiaka. I work with your program called USAID Kuza as the Senior Capacity Development Lead. I'm representing Ronald Musundi, who is the Senior Investment Manager for Impact for Northern Kenya Fund, and we'll hear more about that shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ombaka Vincent, and together with Dr. Ikuru, I've been part of the TRINC project sponsored by the World Bank. And my work was to look at how policy has been working and how government has been working in the ASAL with regard to the ASAL policy issues, just doing a historical analysis so that you can be able to draw out lessons and answer the question why there seems to be initiatives, but then the outcomes and the impact are not commensurate or are not in line with what we desire to see. My report is equally available from with the FCDC. So I think, as Dr. Cruz said, we're prepared to have a longer conversation tomorrow, but we'll be able to squeeze in what we have today. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Donald Matumaini, a manager responsible for technical services at the Equalization Fund. In the session tomorrow, the chair, Equalization Fund Advisory Board, Ambassador Mahmoud, was to be in the panel. He is away today, but he was scheduled to travel in tomorrow. So I've been asked to sit in for the chair in this panel. Thank you.
Okay, so we go back this way. Do you want to make comments?
Thank you so much, Moderator. I wear 2 hats. I'm I'm the daughter of this county, a former women rep, and our commissioner. So this matter of marginalization is dear, so dear to the pastoralist communities and the leaders who are present today here. And the history, Dr. Ekuru Aukot and you participated in drafting the Constitution. The Constitution is very clear. As CRA, the first policy was 14 counties. We moved from 14 to 34 counties. I know that is where the debate and the cry is. And as a Commission of Equity, the lessons that we've learned, and I want to say this without fear or any contradiction, is there was a poor in implementation of the second policy. People say there was court cases that delayed, of course, yes, between COG and National Treasury. There was a regulation that came first from National Treasury. When the Constitution is very clear, it says the implementation of funds must be done directly or indirectly. And I know where the leaders were coming in is they want the fund to be used indirectly, even though National Treasury wants the fund to be used directly. So that delayed. In the presence, up to today, and I think the leaders who are here, it's a challenge they need to take home. We have 7.4 billion of the first policy money that was not dispersed up to today. And that requires, I think, our support. The other thing is, second policy, of course, there have been a lot of cry. CRA were taken to court, and people, of course, they were saying some areas that don't deserve was identified as marginalized areas. So my reaction to the presentation from my chair is, this is a new commission. We look things objectively. We look at the bigger picture of the country. We want to go back and look at all the indexes was used in the first policy, the criteria, parameters that the index was used in the second policy. Because the first policy, it was 14 county years, but issues of historical injustice was there. A development index was there as well. It was roads, water, electricity, all that. But as a third commission, the thing that we want to promise the gathering is we need to go back and make sure the rule of law is followed. The Constitution is very clear on matters of marginalization. What does it say? The drafters of the Constitution wanted the marginalized counties, because this is a fund that has a sunset clause of 20 years. We've already used 13 years. We are remaining with 6 years. Honestly, up to today, 13 years down the line, there is nothing much we can show for this fund. So as we do proper public participation, which we've done as a commission, we've gone around the counties, we've met the stakeholders, and the thing is, the money, the implementation, the administrative cost is high in some areas than money that is intended for implementation. So it's a challenge, and then also, the other thing is about the exchequer, the release of exchequer, and then the leaders also coming up together to make sure what is the priorities areas for their areas and for their region and their counties. So the thing I need to emphasize more is, as an equity commission, we have not done the third policy yet. The reason being, you cannot come up with a third policy when you have not reviewed land challenges, success of the second and the first policy. Because this fund has, it's a sunset clause of 20 years, which I think leaders, they need to lobby, because this is a pastoralist parliamentary group plus FCDC. The pastoralist group, they're very lucky to have a vibrant FCDC chair and a vibrant COG chair. I think this time, if they don't get it right, they will never get it right. So I want just to urge them to use this opportunity that God has granted them, because in my view, we have lost a lot of time. We have lost resources, we have lost time, and some people say, you know, when people fight and you take this fund to the court, that is for any government in power, because they'll say, let them continue with the court case. Let's use this money to sort other pressing issues. So what is important is the pastoral leaders to know that it's an opportunity that you have that's before you. Use it to make sure, together with CRA and the COG and PSP, FCDC and all the pastoralist leadership, we work together to make sure this money, one, is used properly. Then, as CRA, you support us get right identification of marginalized areas. The Constitution is very clear. Who is marginalized area? Where is marginalized area? I thank you, Chair.
That's a very important intervention. It's a challenge to the leaders. On 13 years later, we haven't decided how to unlock the fund. I think it's very, very sad. And there's a big indictment on not just the leaders of this region, but of the country. So we really hope that something can come out of this forum on a way forward. I think private sector perspective, now you can give us a private sector perspective.
Well, I have to found my views very quickly on your seminal research, your demonstration of economic convergence. I think is very compelling. And in that, there's a message. And the message is, don't look at the problems about dividing the cake. Look at the problems on how to make more cake. Because there's a lot of cake here to eat. There's value-added, value chains, value propositions, there's efficiencies. There's a lot of cake to be made here to get the boys and girls of the pastoralist communities in this area to work. And by taking on these different glasses of making more cake, how does that hit the ground? Now, there's cake to be made from changes in technology, and those are massive. It's really mind-boggling as to what those changes of technology can do. And, I mean, you can look at Nairobi. You see people in the street, they're doing business. They're doing business on the smartphones, which they would never have done 5 years ago. And just look at Nairobi. We have buildings which are much, much bigger than they ever used to be because of technology. You can pump things. And you can also change the velocity of money. People are getting richer in the streets of Nairobi. And this economic convergence can continue. Take what's really lacking here in the pastoralist sector is energy. Energy is the ability to do work. Now, up to now, that energy is coming in either a diesel drum or it's coming with a wire. And really you think, where is this return on investment? Are we going to be able to pass that 12% hurdle, right? And there is now a convergence. Just take the energy sector, for example, on that point. If the county could put in its own grid, just like it does its own water supply or its own road, and then collect the monies on the taxes for it or the consumption of water, why can't governors and counties do that? Well, they can now. The technology is there. So how do we harvest that? We don't say, okay, we need a grid for every solution. No, there's photovoltaics, there's energy storage, there's a lot of other ways, from even pump storage and large dams that you're talking about, using that same water to drive the turbines backwards when there's sunshine. So there's a lot of multipliers that we can make more cake on. And that's what I would like us to look at and like to help us do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me give an anecdote about technology. We've been struggling with livestock identification. I think Prof. Gulia is here. Last week or a couple of weeks before, some people showed up with technology and said, hey, we have a technology that identifies livestock with its irises and muzzles. I learned that every cow, like human being, your iris is unique, but for cattle, muzzles are like fingerprint. So you don't have to brand, you don't have to tag, you take a photo, and you have an identification for animals. So yes, technology is there. And these solutions are coming, and they're actually cheap. That's the amazing thing. But let's hear from our court on the equalization fund framework.
Okay, so the study we've done, which is under the TRINC project, is rather long. If we had time, we'll have taken you through some of our findings tomorrow, including some of the policy recommendations and legal gaps that we have identified in the law. But the study starts by identifying the historical marginalization of the northern Kenya. You know, what we call then the Kenya of the North. There was a deliberate colonial policy to lock up certain places. That's why the closed district came about. In fact, if I just use Turkana as an example, there's a Mzungu called Blaine Arden writing in a book called Dispatches from a Fragile Continent. And one of the things that he describes is my people. He says, there is nothing of economic use that can come out of colonizing the Turkana. They are actually a problem that can best be transferred elsewhere. So there was that deliberate marginalization of certain areas, closed down district. But now, that story of marginalization shouldn't be a conversation in this 21st century, in light of the legal framework and the policy frameworks that we have in place. And I say this because we identify in the study that it is leadership from the northern part of Kenya that has refused to exploit certain key constitutional provisions that would otherwise bring equity, not necessarily equality, because equality is an ideal. I don't think we can all be equal. Even where it comes from in Kiambu, they are all not equal, even though people say they have enjoyed the fruits of independence. Equality is an ideal, but we can bring equity. So let me just isolate about 3 articles that I think need to be correlated. We start with Article 6 of the Constitution of Kenya, devolution of services and organs to each and every part of the Republic of Kenya. That is what that is the language in the Constitution. To each and every part of the Republic of Kenya. Meaning, therefore, you cannot hold a national service or organ there because it's national when it is needed at that very level of government. Now, to assist you with that is Article 187. That talks about the transfer of functions and powers between the 2 levels of government if that function or power can effectively be realized in that level. So you cannot tell me that we cannot negotiate and insist. We have an insecurity issue in northern Kenya. So even when we talk about development, it's an abstract, it's an academic exercise if security is not assured. So why is somebody up there at the national level saying the security docket is ours nationally? But that's a service that even the Constitution in Article 6 says it must be devolved to each and every part of the Republic of Kenya. Now, that transfer window is there in Article 187. But in case you doubt that your power has been taken away from you, Article 189 gives you the mechanism via which that agreement can be arrived at. So that you don't feel my power has been taken away from me, now I've been belittled. You can still be the supervisor of how that function is being exercised, so that those Kenyans, we don't need to talk about marginalization anymore. But having said that, so the question that is really emerging is that on the sunset clause, which we created under Article 204 of the Constitution, of course we put in a 20-year sunset clause. But now the debate after our study is, well, did the rest of Kenya wait for 20 years to equalize or to enjoy those services? Why is this sunset clause only to those marginalized areas for 20 years? Is 20 years actually enough? We can't have waited for 21 or 61 years to now begin to talk about marginalization. But the truth will also be told, there is marginalization within marginalization. Today, and I'm happy some of the governors are here, and this is the painful truth, If a certain governor is not in good talking terms with a certain MCA in a certain ward, the people of that ward are in a way being marginalized because of politics. So that is also a factor we need to discuss as pastoralist people, so that when we try to equate ourselves to the rest of Kenya, how are we behaving ourselves internally? So then, of course, the other thing that we identify in the study is that why is there low absorption capacity of these funds, especially the equalization fund? And of course, the counties are now hiding behind the equalization fund. This is a finding we make. They don't want to talk about the equitable share. Even members of parliament, maybe some of them are here, they also don't want to talk about CDF anymore. Everybody is using equalization fund as an excuse. What about CDF? So the question of accountability emerges on how we're spending these funds. Why should people who say we've been marginalized for a long period of time have such a low absorption capacity of funds? Because there's a study that has been done, I think, by the World Bank that shows that counties are actually returning money. If you have needs, why are you returning money? If you have been marginalized for a long period of time, I can see Governor Ray is shaking his head. I hope we can have a debate. But the other issue that is emerging, are there, say, 1 or 2, 3 flagship projects that you can even do inter-counties that can actually begin to change the face of these counties? Can we see closer working relationship between Wajir, Mandera, Garissa, to an extension Isiolo, Marsabit, because you're all interconnected? Why can't we agree on some flagship projects? At the risk of sounding a bit supporting of military coups, I like reading about Ibrahim Traore now, of Burkina Faso. There are certain things he's doing. Not that I advance military takeovers. Don't worry me. Sinishtaki. But this man has undertaken certain flagship projects in Burkina Faso within a very short period of time, and is actually changing the face of Burkina Faso compared to when the imperialists, the French, were actually controlling the uranium and all that. So I think the challenge we're throwing back to you, and I don't want to hog too much time. The report is there with Professor Idle Farah. We have got recommendation on the legal framework and on the policy framework, which my colleague Vincent will speak about. But there is a conversation we really need to have candidly as people from the northern part of Kenya. Because even now, marginalization is actually changing course. And I think I want to refer you to Article 260 of the Constitution, the interpretation article of the Constitution. And it defines who is a marginalized group, who is a marginalized community, including hunter-gatherers, nomads, pastoralists, small communities because of their small relative population. They are being denied deliberately certain function of the state. So that, in a nutshell, really is what our finding is in terms of the analysis of the legal framework. But we can also say there was deliberate delay on the part of the northern counties or the frontier counties not to demand for this fund, especially after the constitution came into effect on the 27th of August 2010. There was a delay window there. Why was that the case? I know the legal framework was not there, but some of these things do not necessarily require a legal framework or even policy framework. They could be administrative. So we don't have to wait, for legal. In fact, we make the finding in the study, law is not actually the problem. There are enough laws, there are enough policies. The question is enforcement and whether there is deliberate political goodwill nationally, but also from these counties to actually realize the inequities that obtain between the marginalized counties, the frontier counties, and the rest of Kenya. I think I'll stop it there.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope that Dr. Okot will invite me to that conversation as a friend of people from Northern Frontier. So don't have the conversation alone. I would be happy to join. Now, Chair, I want to start by addressing one of the issues that you raised, the need to finance development in the ASALs. And this was very excellently explained by the senator from this region. who was indicating why we really need to invest in this region. But why are we not doing enough when we know the region has potential and can transform development of this country? I think for me the starting point is the constraints we are starting with at the national level. If you look at the national budget as we have it now, and I'm going to tell you our thinking of how to deal with this, is that from the starting point, the debt that we borrowed earlier is already taking 60% of the revenues that we generate. So any time that we formulate a budget, 60% of the revenue is going to debt service that we owe, and we can't avoid paying for that. Then you have a small proportion, like 5%, which is going into the payment for the required payment for constitutional offices, pensions, constitutional office holders, and then you have a whopping 22% of the revenue going in to pay for wages and salaries of civil servants. What does that mean? That more than 87% of the revenue that we generate from the starting point of budgeting is earmarked for those particular activities. So we are remaining with only 12-point-something%. What does that imply? It implies that the resources we are left with are so constrained that we are unable to send enough resources to these regions the way we would like to. So what have we done? We have relied very heavily on development partners to finance activities in the pastoralist areas or in the ASAL areas in general, and those resources from development partners are also not adequate. Now, the other instrument we have, which we are leveraging on at the moment, are instruments such as the equalization fund that has been mentioned very widely, and we know the constraints with the equalization fund. As the chair has indicated, the equalization fund was envisaged to target marginalized areas. Now we have extended equalization fund to even areas that may be marginalized in quotes but are really not marginalized. And therefore, because of spreading it too thin, it is not having the full impact that it could have. And therefore, I really completely agree with the chair's view that we need to rethink the dynamics within the implementation of the equalization fund, and the CRA and the members of parliament have a key role to play in that. The other instrument we have, of course, is the CDF, which has done a tremendous job. The amounts are not enough, but that has done a tremendous job. We have the Affirmative Action Fund that has also done a fairly good job. The amount is small, but that is an instrument that continues to be used at the grassroots development level. We have funds like the Women and Youth Fund, which have been used. Of course, the amounts are small, but of course, those are the instruments that are available. Of course, the Hustler Fund at the moment, the Financial Inclusion Fund. Now, then, in addition to that, currently we are relying very heavily, as I've indicated, on development partners. So for infrastructure development, which is very expensive, we have had now to rely very heavily on the development partners through projects such as what we call the Drive. The Drive is de-risking, inclusion and value enhancement for pastoral communities. That's a major program that is being supported by development partners. We have programs such as FLOCA, the locally led climate action program, that is being financed by development partners. And of course, there are big programs in infrastructure development. So essentially, if you look at what we have done, we have deliberately ignored that theoretical economic thinking where you look at Kirinyaga as having more impact in terms of the amount you spend per person rather than looking at the impact that the project will have. Now, to be honest with you, I have gone to a number of ASAL areas and I have seen the transformation that 100 million shillings will make in Turkana in terms of livelihoods, and the transformation that 100 million shillings will make in Nairobi, you cannot compare. The 100 million shillings that you invest in Turkana will change lives so dramatically. I'll give you a bad example because this is an example that also affects me. If the 27 billion shilling that was invested in the Nairobi Expressway was invested in Turkana, the change that would have taken place in Turkana or Wajir or anywhere would be so tremendous, much more than the convenience that it is giving us by not spending 30 minutes in traffic jam. Yes, it is a good piece of infrastructure, but if that money was put elsewhere, it would have had a much better impact. So the challenge is to our legislators, to our governors, anytime we are doing the budget, we need to ensure that our priorities are right. We need to ensure that even as we develop critical infrastructure in areas such as Nairobi and other parts of the country, we do not ignore the marginalized areas where the impact is going to be bigger. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So, good afternoon once again. Good afternoon once again. Yes, like I mentioned, the name is John Githiaka. And in line with the theme that we have today, unlocking the policy and financial bottlenecks, I want to just spend 3 minutes to just outline a few initiatives that we've been working with the county government. Even as I start off, it's a standing ovation to the county leadership led by His Excellencies, the governors who are seated here, because although we speak of many challenges, but I'm also very confident to report that there have also been very tremendous, encouraging progress that has been happening in the last few years. And this is just what I want to just highlight a bit. In form of a background, let me say that my entire working life I've worked in Northern Kenya. I remember just when Mzee Kibaki was coming into power, and I was posted to work in Marsabit County. And I had to go and work in Ileret. And I had to sleep on top of a Land Cruiser because of there's no place to sleep. And the rest of the time it's been there. Let me mention a bit of some of the work that we are doing through a program called USAID Kuza, which is a program that is supported by USAID Kenya East Africa Mission and working very closely with the FCDC. I want to thank the economic bloc because of the tremendous coordination support that they have provided together with the county governments. The program works to promote economic opportunities in Northern Kenya. We know that NFD had a very negative connotation in the past, but as a program, we always say that the Northern Kenya is the new frontier for development. The rest of Kenya probably has reached some level of saturation, but the new impact that you are seeing, as Dr. D mentioned, is coming from Northern Kenya. In terms of the specifics that the counties have done, and which is very commendable and which you are building on the first aspect of the work that you do, which is around enabling policy environment that promotes both the policy framework but also the financing framework. We've worked with the FCDC counties in having the economic bloc, which has attracted a lot of investment in that. Secondly, in form of the enabling environment, you know that insecurity has been a source of capital flight in the region. Once again, we've worked with the CDC in many counties, including Turkana, West Pokot, Lamu, and Samburu, to work on the peace building and conflict management policy and bill. And it is very encouraging because the counties are actually taking this challenge head on and addressing it. Kudos also to Marsabit, the county that is, we have been working together and we are doing the public-private partnerships policy that is at the cabinet level being finalized, so that this can also be another way of attracting financing and investment in that county. We've also worked with a few counties, and I want to appreciate our hosts, county government, Your Excellency, that is Wajir County and also Marsabit County. We've been working together on the enterprise fund management policy that is also helping the counties to manage these enterprise funds, like the Women Fund. And on this, again, I also want to give a heads up to West Pokot County. I can see, Your Excellency, the DG is here. This is one of the counties that is shining in terms of managing the government-led enterprise funds within the county. And we've also had some other counties like Marsabit also doing a learning exchange so that they can also learn and do some of these lessons. West Pokot, once again, they're in the process of doing an investment policy, which we are supporting, and also Samburu and Tana River. Let me also echo the words which my colleagues have mentioned here. We've been working very closely with the World Bank in supporting the counties to access the climate financing through the FLOCA program. And specifically West Pokot and Lamu have been the counties on the forefront in assisting them to access those funds by meeting the access conditions. Also want to appreciate the Commission for Revenue Allocation, who we've supported for them to extend the building of the capacity of the county budget and economic fora across the counties in northern Kenya. Through CRA, we've been able to support Lamu, Turkana, West Pokot, Tana River, and Mandera counties to train and to build the capacity of their county budget and economic fora. Again, a heads up to Lamu County that has also gone a step further to build their internal capacity on own source revenue. As we know that the national disbursements are becoming a challenge by the day, but this is one of the counties that has made very, very strides on that area. I think as I end my note is just to mention that USAID Kuza, the biggest component of this program is on investments. And this is specifically financing to the northern Kenya. And in this specific area, we've worked with the counties, one, to support the development of the northern Kenya as an investable destination. And we worked through FCDC to develop an investment plan that markets the northern Kenya as an investable destination. Secondly, we've also worked to develop the capacity of the county departments of trade, industry, cooperatives, enterprise development, finance and economic planning in terms of concretizing those investable opportunities. And I'm really happy to mention again, there are some few initiatives that are already going on. We have, for example, West Pokot doing a fresh produce market that is going to be serving about 5 counties and the part of Western Uganda, a market of, if I'm not wrong, about 130 million. That is a joint initiative of the county government together with USAID Kuza. And the groundbreaking is just happening. And this is an initiative led by the county. Lamu County is also doing some work around crab farming. And Your Excellency, thank you very much once again. The blue economy space doing quite some amazing work there. Some of us attended the Northern Kenya Impact Investment Conferences that were held in the regions. Turkana County hosted the West Pokot and Turkana. Isiolo County hosted Isiolo, Marsabit, Samburu. Lamu County very graciously hosted the northeastern counties together with the Tana River and Lamu. And you can all attest to the very, very immense potential that is coming up in this region. My very final one is just to bring us to attention about a fund that is run by USAID Kuza, which already you are aware of, called the INC Fund, Impact for Northern Kenya Fund, which is a catalytic fund. Again, the seed capital provided by USAID but matched by our government. And this is providing the last mile financing to the micro, small, and medium enterprises at the bottom of the pyramid. Those ones that would ordinarily not be able to access financing from the mainstream banking. And I'm really happy to note that unlike the previous thoughts that Northern Kenya is not an investable destination, the investment appetite in the north is so much so that the fund is not even enough. As we speak today, if you allow me to just give some few results, is that by end of October, we had $23.2 million being disbursed to 14,100 micro, small, and medium enterprises in northern Kenya. Of these, $11 million had a very direct impact on climate mitigation. These are funding that meet what you call the triple bottom line. On one hand, this is financing that is commercially viable, that is a business enterprise is putting money in people's pockets. Number two, it is financing that has businesses that have social impact. And number three, that have environmental sustainability, knowing that many of the challenges of northern Kenya are related to climate. And through this work, we've also built a capacity of about 1,800 county officials and partners, including on Islamic financing, in recognition that a very significant proportion of northern Kenya has the Islamic faith. And what is the bottom line of all this? Is that as at that period, about 23,698 jobs, direct jobs, were created through that work. So we want to end it by just appreciating the leadership that is being provided with the counties, in spite of the tremendous challenges that sometimes our counties and our communities are operating in. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So 1963, April, the Earl of Leighton was talking in the House of Lords, and he mentioned that the Northern Frontier District was so unimportant that it was called a district and not a province. That summarizes the attitude of the colonial government. He was discussing the Constitution of Kenya Conference of 1962 and the conversations that Tom Mboya was having and Kenyatta, because the question was, where should we place the Northern Frontier District? Should we go to Somalia or not? So that summarizes the colonial perspective. I think Dr. Ndi has already talked about what session of paper number 10 of 1965 did in terms of high potential, low potential, and that categorization. Of course, the shifter war complicated the attitude further because it happened within the same period, ending, I think, late 60s, early 70s. But then in 1974, we start having a slight shift with Regional Development Authority. I think the first one was the Wasongiro, if I'm not wrong, or one of them. So between 1974 and 1990, government starts noticing that we need to invest and have a change towards these frontier places. So the approach was regional development authorities. Might have been deliberate, it might not have been deliberate, but that was the effort at that point. Fast forward to the year 2003 when we have the economic recovery strategy, and for the first time we have a whole chapter appearing in our national policies addressing ASAL in Kenya. And that was built up upon Vision 2030, and then come the year 2012, Honorable Elmi, we come up with the 2030 development strategy for Northern Kenya and ASAL areas. We also come up with session of paper number 8 of 2012 on the ASAL policy. But then 2013, in the transition, something happens. Number one, we were moving from a ministry of Northern Kenya, so there was a build-up. There was a build-up from colonial neglect, post-colonial neglect, attention being given by government, mainstream agenda for policy going into the ASAL. In 2013, when we were reorganizing government, the ASAL department disappeared. And yet, in the session of paper number 8 of 2012, the ASAL department was supposed to be the secretariat that is coordinating. In fact, the interesting thing is when you read the NDMA strategic plan of 2013-2017, it even mentions that there is supposed to be a secretariat to coordinate development in northern Kenya. But that secretariat was missing. Now, the other interesting thing is this. Who was the leader of majority in 2013-2017? Who was leader of majority? I haven't heard you properly. Who was leader of majority? Tell your neighbor. So when government business was throwing aside ASAL business, it was the ASAL region that was leading government business. So not to condemn the honorable member of parliament back there, as he was back then, but just to show that in terms of opportunity, both constitutionally and in terms of policy, we've had various advances, but we have struggled to harness those opportunities. Maybe the other observation in connection to the question that was raised on equalization fund is, what is the true value of equalizing the North? Do we know it? Because the interesting thing is, part of my project was analyzing NEDI, the NEDI project by the World Bank. So analyzing the amount of debt development that is coming to northern Kenya, both directly and also aggregated from all the other World Bank projects. The World Bank has spent $2 billion, or is in the process of spending up to $2 billion between 2018 to date. Do you know how much equalization fund is from the same period? Less than $200 million. So if the World Bank has spent $2 billion and we have still not yet solved the problems, are we putting too much hope on $200 million? We have to ask ourselves, what is the true cost of this thing you're calling equalization? If it is roads, how many roads do we need to be able to achieve the economic impact that Dr. Ndi is talking about? What is the value? Because we may be thinking that equalization fund is going to achieve a lot, but if we look at what the World Bank has done with NEDI, vis-a-vis what we could have done with the whole of $200 million in equalization fund all the way from 2014 to date, you can see that particular disparity. So I think it's one of the things which came out from our study is that it's very important that leaders in northern Kenya are very conversant with the policy initiatives for the region. I was surprised. There are people within government who do not even know that there was a Vision 2030 development strategy for northern Kenya, both at county level and at national level. Even in the State Department for Planning, very few people are aware that such a project was in existence from a particular point in time. And therefore it meant that while we were planning nationally with our big numbers of 102 or 109 members of parliament, we were unable to push. But the other thing looking at NEDI is, in Kenya, debt is becoming the budget within the budget. So it's very important you ask yourself, the real budget is debt. Because every time we are told we want development, we are told that debt is crowding out our fiscal space. So we have to ask ourselves, so who is doing the debt? I stand corrected, but last time I checked, the Eurobond prospectus of 2015 had 129 pages. But there was one chapter with only one paragraph. The paragraph on how the money was going to be used. So you have to ask yourself, where were our member of parliament when this money was being borrowed? Because in this country, once money enters somebody's hands, that is gone. So you have to ask yourself, at the planning, at the advocacy stage, maybe we need to coalesce ourselves so that as the PLS, we can have a very targeted policy direction. My last example is going to be, I also looked at the institutions. One of the interesting institutions is the Livestock Development, I think it's called Livestock Development Something Council, legal notice of 2016 to set up a Livestock Development Board. Now in this country, a single crop like pyrethrum receives a lot of government attention. I come from the Sugar Belt. It's an exchange program. Junet Mohammed came from Migori. I was sent here. But you see, if we look at that whole system, why is livestock, a whole integrated sector, not receiving equivalent attention? And up to date, maybe something has changed the last 1 week, but last I checked, from 2016 to date, that livestock marketing board has never been appointed. Whose responsibility is it to hold the executive accountable? So I think the tool on representation, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, is not being adequately used by the leaders in northern Kenya. Those are my many summarized and shrinked comments. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. I'll quickly react to the presentation by Dr. Ndi and the one by CRA Chair. So on the aspect of Dr. Ndi's presentation on the impact, Equalization Fund had 12.4 billion in 2018, Equalization Fund Appropriation Act. So this one was meant to implement 360 projects So on average, that's around 30 million. Then in the second policy, that is in 2023, we had 10.3 billion to implement 1,126 projects that were launched on 4th of this month in Nairobi at KICC by the PCS on behalf of the President. So on average, that's around 6.5 million per project. In the first policy, that is in 2018, the highest project had around 247 million. That was a road, a bridge construction of a bridge in Isiolo County that was connecting two areas that have always been cut off whenever it rains. In the second policy, on average, spending around 6 million to a maximum of around maybe 10 to 20 million. So again, that is the aspect of the impact in terms of implementation of the fund. In terms of time and financial resources that CRA Chair has mentioned, we have been a bit slow, of course, in the implement because of several challenges, including litigations against the frameworks that are set by the law. But just to say that in the first policy, the 360 projects that were implemented, 265 are complete. So the remaining 95 are still ongoing. Some of them are at very low levels of implementation. But because of the time aspect, value has been lost in these projects. So there has been cost escalations, and the implementing agencies are not able to complete some of them. Even though we have ring-fenced resources for these projects, the cost now is higher than what is available for them. So there will be need maybe for national government ministries to work together with counties to be able to unlock the value for these projects so that they are completed and serve the communities. Then in the second aspect of resources, currently already counties are accessing resources for implementation of the second policy. Of the 1,236 projects that were launched, already 100 of them are complete, done by the county governments. So this is now a collaboration between the national government and the county governments. To finalize, I think the CRA Commissioner, Honorable Fatuma, has already alluded to the fact that the aspect of impact is mainly anchored on the policy rather than on the implementation side. That is what I can say from the implementation side. Thank you.
Okay, this is better. I think we have overrun our time a little bit, but we do have time for a plenary. And if you're not very hungry, yesterday we were discussing at my table that the leaders of the forum decided to give us an experiential whatever of what going hungry is. So those of us from the parts which do not have drought and hunger, so that you can have some experience to remember. But if you're not very hungry, we can actually extend that if you feel that you want to exhaust the subject. But let's do the following. Without much ado, take 3 questions. Their hands are already up. I'm told that there will be mics going around. Where are the mic people? And we are going to start with Honorable Kaparo for obvious reasons of sage wisdom, and then Sankok, and then the gentleman in between, and then we will go to the next cluster around them. And please, if you are to respond to the questions, 1 minute.
Yeah, my name is Ole Kaparo, Francis. And I was the first patron of PPG. And at the time we set out to set up that organization, there were certain things that were in our minds that led us to bring this organization forth. Number 1 is what I have listened this morning here, particularly from you, Mr. Lee, that condescending attitude towards the people who keep cattle, goats, and camel. I think we must get out of that. That condescending attitude is unnecessary and it is demeaning. Number two was what was the mindset of the Kenyan government through session of paper number 10 of 1965, that anything, anywhere south of the railway line and north of the equator must be ignored because it had no economic potential. And that remained so for a long time. And that is what we wanted to break when we set out to create PPP. And I believe this is what should be looked at closely. Number three, I want to correct this notion. PPG is not about northern Kenya. It is about pastoralists wherever they are. And there are pastoralists in southern Kenya, in Kajiado, in Narok. There are also in the coast. They are also in the middle of Kenya, like Laikipia specifically, where I come from. They are also in the far-flung western part of Kenya, in Turkana. You know, this whole attitude of saying northern Kenya, you are trying to divide us. You are trying to divide us so that you can rule us easily. All right? And this must stop because we are not likely and we are not about to agree to be colonized again. Si munasikia? Muko na masikio? Tafadhali mtuangalie kama wafugaji popote tuliko. Sisi ni wafugaji na hatujafanya makosa kufuga. Mbona mnapenda nyama? Kwani nyama hukuzwa juu ya miti? Inatusumbua sana kushunga ng'ombe. Tunaumia jameni. Na tunataka serikali itusaidie kwa sababu ni wajibu yake na ni haki yetu. Sisi tu wa Kenya pia. Tu wa Kenya wazalendo. Na tunatakiwa kuangaliwa hivyo. Na nyinyi wazalendo, watoto wangu wengi, nyinyi wabunge sasa, niliwatengenezea chombo hiki tukiwa na dokta wako, na wako akafutwa kwa sababu ya kuwa mwenyekiti wetu. Huyu alivutwa saa 7 ya mchana. Taarifa ya habari, kwa sababu hatukutakiwa kuwa na sauti yetu. Na mimi kama spika nilisimama na hawa. Simameni pamoja ndugu zangu na watoto wangu. Simameni pamoja, muache uchoyo wa roho na akili. Peaneni akili yenu bila kuwa na choyo. Na msije pia naogopa. Usije mkaogopa macho ya wale wengine. Wakigondoa macho, gondoa. Na kama macho yako haionekani, nitakupa miwani. Mmesikia? Haya, naomba kuketi.
That is a very good question from our senior. And also my question building on what the senior have said to Honorable Ndi. When you compare our livestock to poaching of gazelles, as they are just free browsers and we invest nothing, I can tell you, Honorable Ndi, apart from when we sit in the boardroom, those who are on the ground, we invest a lot. We vaccinate these animals. We are actually doctors of these animals. When they get sick, we treat. There is curative. We also deworm these animals. We spray them every week
And also, we work as midwives of those animals. So please, we invest a lot. They are not like wild animals that are poached. There is an investment attached to it. Again, honorable members, I think it is high time that we start speaking to ourselves. Because one fish, which is half a kg, costs around 1,000 shillings. So 1 kg of fish is 2,000 shillings. Yet 1 kg of beef is 400 shillings. Yet beef, we have struggled, we have vaccinated, we have treated, we have looked after, we have paid shepherd, we have given our land as boarding so that they can sleep there. And for the fish, unaenda kurokota kwa bahari bila kutumia anything, alafu unakuja kutuuzia 2,000 kwa kilo moja, na hujapatia chumvi, na hujadiwom, na hujapatia dawa ya minyoo. So sometimes we have to be fair as a country. Lastly, I think when we speak about minimum guaranteed returns, and this is to the honorable members, mukisikia, unajua ile Kapora amesema tuangaliane macho kwa macho. Wakati wanaongea mambo ya kahawa, tuongee mambo ya ngamia. Wakati wanaongea mambo ya majani chai, tuongee mambo ya kondoo. Wakati wanaongea mambo ya sugarcane, I think somebody from the sugarcane belt, hata Wetangula from the sugarcane belt, wakati wanaongea mambo ya sugarcane, hata sisi tuongee mambo ya ng'ombe. I think that is the only way we can be equal as a country. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name is Julius Sunkuli, MP Kilgoris. And mine will be very short. I listen a lot to Dr. Ekuru Aukot on TV and so on. He's my friend, and I admire his mind, his brain. So I'll avoid making a comment on what you said because I think that was redeeming. But I've also listened to Dr. Ndi, whom I've read about and heard about so much. And I must say, he's a very brilliant mind. And I have tried to follow the argument today very keenly. It's very enlightening. Just one comment about what Dr. Ndi has said. He has explained to us the origin of marginalization, being a policy that divided, sorry just to import the French one, that divided between useful Kenya and useless Kenya. And that philosophy and the way you drive demographics with the politics, that where there are more people, you will take more roads because you'll get more returns. Now, if you also go back to the history of Kenya, we did not actually become a country by consent. We were brought together by sort of force. Those of us from Masai land were mutilated into two. So we were not here by consent. But if now, because we are here governed by a common constitution, when do you think that thinking of useful Kenya and useless Kenya will stop? Don't you think that you owe us a duty to therefore say, we have used this philosophy for some time, now it's the end, we have to go better. Because as people are saying here, it's still continuing. The other day when we had in Isiolo, in Achas Post, the Masai Forum, I had an opportunity to drive from Nairobi to Kirinyaga. I didn't know that that road has now become a dual carriageway from that place to the other place. In Narok, if I have to travel from Kilgoris to my headquarters, I have to go through other provinces. When do you think we are going to get an opportunity to actually equalize ourselves? And now, Dr. D, this is my last comment. I know you are an intellectual, and once day you might have written in one of your writings that give me a place to stand and I'll move the world. I know that now you are in the best place. Can you move the world? Can you move this policy towards our direction too? Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. More hands. Let me just clear the Sankok issue about poaching because you missed my point. I want to invite you to go and look at the budget of KWS. And you will notice that the government invests more in protecting wildlife than in the livestock sector. So I was not talking about investment by wafugaji. I was talking about investment by the government. So that the way we look at wafugaji and their livestock is the same way we look at wildlife as a resource that is out there that you don't need to put the kind of infrastructure. So it's a mindset. I was really speaking to the mindset of the state, not to, because they graze in the same place. Sasa tukiona ng'ombe na swara wakikula pamoja, the attitude that Kaparo is talking about, that is what I was speaking to. Not that pastoralists do not invest in their livestock as they do. It is the reason why we don't invest as the state. Not that pastoralists do not invest. Yeah, but next question. Governor, and is that governor, deputy governor, I think?
I have the mic. Let me.
Oh, Mikey.
Thank you very much, Dr. and the panelists. My name is Dido Rasoy. I'm the MP for Saku and also the patron of the Pastoralist group. My first advice, wherever a panel of this nature is constituted, there must be real pastoralists sitting in it, people who are practitioners. I know Wakili is a pastoralist, but just in passing, and our sister. So it is really important that perspective like what Memusi gave is what we are here about. Secondly, there's this notion that pastoralists are always complaining, like what the speaker said last night. I don't know what it is called in the Bible. Lamentation. But I want to tell you, my brothers and sisters, if you don't complain, people will not know if you have a problem. So you must always complain at every forum so that you are heard. So my first question is on the equalization fund. I think sitting here and also sitting in the House, we are cross with this particular attitude of changing the game midstream. Article 204 of our Constitution is very clear. Bringing some parts of the country which are behind to the rest of Kenya. Now, what will tell us that allocation in Muranga is behind? That is a sort of self-inflicted marginalization. You cannot compare it to Lamu, Mandera, Marsabit, or Turkana. So for that reason, I want to ask, going forward, what is it that we can do so that the third session or the third attempt in trying to address equalization fund will not go in the same stream as what happened in equalization session 2. The second question, what we wanted to hear are two things. What are the policy, the financial guidance, or both in terms of making laws or making white papers so that this issue of pastoralist is addressed? But from what I have heard from yourself, I think you have not talked about that. Somebody talked about NEDI. And I want to finish at that point. You say that NEDI is giving $2 billion. $2 billion, not 2 billion shillings. what is happening is that a lot of money is being